They thought they'd finally expose him. Three men, hidden camera rolling, waiting to watch their perfect coworker crumble. The setup was cruel. A blind date with a deaf woman, designed to strip away Evan Brooks' mask of kindness and reveal the fraud they believed him to be. But when Lily Hart walked through that restaurant door, signing her greeting with uncertain hope, something happened that none of them, not the plotters, not Lily, maybe not even Evan himself, saw coming. What started as a trap became something else entirely. This is the story of how hatred tried to destroy love and failed spectacularly. Before we begin, comment below with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's dive in. The Martinez Grill sat on the corner of 5th and Westwood like a jewel box someone had accidentally left open. All warm Edison bulbs, exposed brick, and the kind of artisanal cocktails that cost $18 and came with a sprig of something you couldn't pronounce. It was exactly the sort of place where young professionals gathered to celebrate promotions, mark milestones, or, in the case of three men currently huddled around a corner booth, orchestrate someone's humiliation. Derek Lawson leaned back against the leather seat, his phone pressed against his palm like a talisman. On the screen, a live feed flickered, the restaurant's main dining area, shot from a carefully concealed angle. He'd positioned the camera himself that afternoon, tucking the tiny device into a decorative arrangement of succulents on a shelf that offered a perfect view of table 12. The one they'd reserved. The one where Evan Brooks would be sitting in approximately 17 minutes. "Audio check," Derek muttered, and Marcus Chen, seated across from him, gave a thumbs up as his own phone picked up the transmission crystal clear. "We're golden," Marcus said, though his voice carried a tremor that might have been excitement or might have been something closer to guilt. "Full video, full audio. We're going to catch everything." "Everything," Derek repeated, and the word tasted like vindication. The third man, Joel Peterson, hadn't spoken in 5 minutes. He sat closest to the wall, nursing a beer he wasn't drinking, watching his two colleagues with an expression that was harder to read. Joel was newer to the company, only 18 months compared to Derek's 5 years and Marcus's 3, and he still carried that fresh-faced optimism that working in marketing at Brightline Solutions hadn't quite beaten out of him yet. But even Joel had grievances. Even Joel had watched Evan Brooks glide through the office like some kind of corporate prince, collecting praise and promotions while the rest of them scrambled for scraps. "You're sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Joel asked finally. Derek's smile was sharp enough to cut. "He thinks it's a genuine blind date setup. Sarah from HR sold it perfectly, told him she had a friend who just moved to the city, thought they'd be a great match. Evan probably thinks he's doing her a favor." "Because that's who Evan is," Marcus added, and there was no missing the bitterness there. "Always doing favors, always so helpful, always so goddamn perfect." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with resentment that had been building for months, maybe years. Evan Brooks had joined Brightline Solutions 3.5 years ago, brought in as a senior strategist when the rest of them were still trying to prove they deserved their mid-level positions. He'd arrived with impeccable credentials, an MBA from Northwestern, 5 years at a top-tier firm in Chicago, references that read like love letters. But it wasn't his resume that stuck in Derek's throat like a chicken bone. It was everything else. It was the way Evan always volunteered to take on the nightmare clients, the ones who called at 11 p.m. demanding revisions on campaigns that had been approved weeks ago. It was how he remembered everyone's coffee orders, how he asked about your sick kid or your dying cat, how he stayed late to help junior associates fine-tune their presentations without ever making it seem like an imposition. It was the way their boss, Catherine Morrison, lit up whenever Evan walked into a room, and how the executive team had started casually mentioning his name when they talked about the future of the company. It was in Derek's carefully considered opinion, complete and total bullshit. Nobody was that nice. Nobody was that competent, that patient, that consistently decent without an agenda. Derek had been in corporate America long enough to know that kindness was a strategy, competence was a weapon, and the people who seemed too good to be true usually were. Evan Brooks was playing a long game, manufacturing an image, and Derek was sick of being the only one who seemed to see through it. The promotional announcement 2 weeks ago had been the final straw. Catherine had called an all-hands meeting to announce that Evan was being promoted to Director of Client Strategy, a newly created position that came with a 30% raise, a corner office, and a seat at the executive table. The same executive table that Derek had been positioning himself toward for the past 5 years, through late nights and sacrificed weekends and schmoozing at company events that made his teeth ache. And Evan had won it, with his perfect smile and his perfect track record and his perfect fake kindness. 3 years, Derek had said to Marcus that night, drinks deep at a bar 2 blocks from the office. 3 years, and he jumps ahead of all of us. You know why? Because he's good at his job? Marcus had offered, though even he hadn't sounded convinced. Because he's good at acting, Derek had corrected. Because everyone buys his nice guy routine. But it's a routine, Marcus. It has to be. And I'm going to prove it. The plan had crystallized over the next several days, helped along by bourbon and bitterness and a shared sense that something needed to be done. They needed to expose Evan for what he really was. They needed to catch him in a moment when the mask slipped, when the performance faltered, when his true colors showed through. They needed proof that would make Catherine and the executives see what Derek had known all along. And then Sarah from HR, sweet, naive Sarah, who had a soft spot for Evan because he'd helped her nephew get an internship, had mentioned in passing that she wished she could set Evan up with her friend Lily. He's been single for so long, Sarah had sighed, since his wife died. I think he's lonely, but he's so devoted to his daughter that he won't make time for himself. Derek had practically felt the light bulb click on over his head. Lily Hart was deaf. Sarah had mentioned it casually, in the context of explaining why it was hard for Lily to meet people through traditional dating channels, and Derek, his mind already churning with possibility, had volunteered to help arrange the introduction. I know the perfect place, he told Sarah. Intimate, quiet, great for conversation. Let me handle the reservation. Sarah, trusting and grateful, had agreed immediately. What she didn't know, what she would never know unless this all went catastrophically wrong, was that Derek had no intention of this being a genuine setup. This was a test, a trap, a carefully designed scenario to catch Evan Brooks doing what Derek was certain he would do: panic, make excuses, and bail the moment he realized his date couldn't hear him. Because that's what anyone would do, wasn't it? Faced with an unexpected challenge, a situation they hadn't prepared for, something that disrupted their careful image, they'd retreat. They'd show their true selves, the irritation, the discomfort, the desire to be anywhere but there, and Derek would have it all on camera. He's here, Marcus hissed suddenly, and all 3 men instinctively hunched lower in their booth, though they were around a corner and completely out of Evan's sightline. On Derek's phone screen, Evan Brooks had just walked through the restaurant's entrance. He looked, Derek noted with irritation, exactly as he always did, put together without being flashy, wearing dark slacks and a button-down shirt in soft blue that probably cost more than Derek's entire outfit but didn't announce it. His dark hair was neatly styled, his expression open and friendly as he spoke to the hostess. Even from the grainy camera footage, Derek could see the smile. Warm, genuine. The smile of a man who was actually looking forward to this evening. The smile of a man who had no idea what was about to hit him. Table 12 for Brooks, they heard Evan say, his voice coming through clearly on the audio feed. I'm a little early. The reservation isn't for another 10 minutes. No problem at all, the hostess replied. Would you like to wait at the table or at the bar? The table's fine, thank you so much. Thank you so much, even to a hostess just doing her job, even when no one was watching. Derek's jaw tightened. They watched as Evan was led to table 12, perfect positioning in the camera's frame, and settled into his seat. He didn't immediately pull out his phone the way most people would. Instead, he glanced around the restaurant with what looked like genuine interest, taking in the atmosphere, the other diners, the art on the walls. He smiled at a couple celebrating something at a nearby table, raising his water glass in a small toast when they glanced his way. He's performing for an audience of nobody, Derek muttered, keeping in character. Joel shifted uncomfortably, or maybe he's just like that. Nobody's just like that, Derek shot back. Marcus checked his watch. 7 minutes. You think she'll show? She'll show, Derek said with confidence. Sarah had confirmed it that morning. Lily was excited about the setup, had even mentioned it was her first real date in over a year. She had no idea this wasn't what it seemed, just like Evan had no idea. They were both walking into this blind. The irony wasn't lost on Derek. At table 12, Evan ordered a glass of wine, nothing expensive or ostentatious, just a mid-range Pinot Noir, and sat back to wait. Derek studied him through the camera feed, searching for any sign of anxiety or deception. But Evan just looked relaxed, maybe a little nervous in the normal way people got before first dates, but nothing more than that. "What do you think he's expecting?" Marcus asked quietly. "Doesn't matter," Derek said. "What matters is what he's about to get." The minutes ticked by. Evan sipped his wine slowly. A server stopped by to chat, probably someone Evan had charmed on one of his previous visits, Derek thought sourly, and Evan laughed at something they said, easy and natural. Everything about him radiated contentment, anticipation, the kind of open hopefulness that made Derek want to throw his phone across the restaurant. How dare he? How dare Evan Brooks sit there looking genuinely happy, genuinely excited to meet someone, when this whole thing was about to blow up in his face, when Derek was about to prove what he really was. "There," Joel said suddenly, pointing toward the restaurant's entrance. "Is that her?" All three men froze, eyes locked on the screen. A woman had just walked through the door, and even through the limited camera angle, Derek could see why Sarah had wanted to set her up with Evan. Lily Hart was striking, tall and slender, with long dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, wearing a deep green dress that was elegant without being overstated. She moved with a certain carefulness, her eyes scanning the restaurant with an intensity that suggested she was taking in more than just the decor. She was reading the room the way deaf people learn to read rooms, Derek knew, mapping exits and sight lines, positioning herself to see faces clearly, unconsciously preparing to navigate a hearing world that rarely made space for her. The hostess approached her with a smile, saying something they couldn't quite catch on the audio. Lily responded, and Derek noticed the particular quality of her voice, the slight flatness that sometimes characterized deaf speech, the careful enunciation of someone who had learned to speak without being able to hear herself do it. "I'm here to meet someone," Lily said. "The reservation should be under Brooks?" The hostess checked her tablet, nodded, and gestured toward table 12. Lily's face brightened. She had a beautiful smile, Derek noted distantly, warm and slightly nervous. She followed the hostess through the restaurant, her posture carrying a mixture of hope and guardedness that Derek recognized from every blind date he'd ever been on. She had no idea this was a setup, no idea she was about to become the unwitting instrument of Evan Brooks' exposure. For just a moment, barely a flicker, Derek felt something that might have been guilt. Then Lily reached table 12, and Evan Brooks looked up, and everything changed. Later, when Derek would replay this footage over and over again in his mind, trying to understand exactly when his plan had started to unravel, he would come back to this moment, to the precise second when Evan's eyes met Lily's, and something shifted in his expression. It wasn't panic, it wasn't discomfort, it wasn't the flash of irritation Derek had been so certain would appear. It was recognition. Evan's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, certainly, but not the bad kind. More like the surprise of a puzzle piece clicking into place. And then, before Lily had even fully approached the table, before she'd said a word or signed a single gesture, Evan smiled. Not his professional smile, not his work smile. Something different, something softer. And he stood up, pushing back his chair in a smooth motion, and raised his hands to sign. "Hello, you must be Lily." The restaurant didn't go silent. That only happens in movies. The ambient noise continued, the clatter of dishes and murmur of conversation, the soft jazz playing over the speakers. But in the booth around the corner, Derek, Marcus, and Joel might as well have been struck deaf themselves. "What the hell?" Marcus breathed. On the screen, Lily had stopped moving entirely. She stared at Evan, her eyes wide, her hands frozen halfway to responding. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. When she finally signed back, her movements were slow, disbelieving. "You know sign language?" "It was my first language," Evan signed, his movements fluid and natural. "My mother is deaf. I grew up signing before I learned to speak." Derek felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "This isn't happening," he said flatly. There's no way." But it was happening. Right there on the screen, undeniable and impossible and completely real. Evan gestured to the chair across from him. still signing as he spoke aloud for the benefit of the servers and nearby diners. "Please, sit. I'm so glad you're here. Sarah told me wonderful things about you." Lily moved to the chair like she was in a dream, lowering herself carefully while never taking her eyes off Evan. She signed something too quick for Derek to follow. He'd learned a grand total of 15 signs from a YouTube video yesterday, thinking it might be useful to understand when Evan tried to fumble through basic phrases, but Evan caught it and laughed, a genuine delighted sound. "Yes, really," he signed. "My mom made sure I was fluent. She always said I should be able to communicate with everyone in the family, and she refused to be the one left out of conversations." "I like your mother already," Lily signed, and there was something in her expression that Derek didn't want to acknowledge, something that looked like the slow unfurling of hope in someone who'd learned not to hope too easily. "I'm sorry Sarah didn't tell you I could sign," Evan continued, his hands moving as naturally as his voice. "She probably thought I'd want it to be a surprise, though I imagine she didn't tell me you were deaf for the same reason." "She didn't," Lily confirmed. "I almost canceled 3 times because, well, first dates are complicated enough without the communication barrier." "I understand," Evan signed, and the way he looked at her suggested he really did. "For what it's worth, I'm really glad you didn't cancel, and there's no barrier here. We can communicate just fine." A server approached, young, cheerful, completely oblivious to the minor miracle happening at table 12, and started to speak to Lily before Evan gently intercepted. "She's deaf," Evan said pleasantly. "I'll be interpreting. Could you give us a moment to look at the menu?" "Of course." The server's cheer didn't falter for a second, though Derek suspected they'd probably been on autopilot and would feel mortified about it later. "Take all the time you need." As the server retreated, Evan caught Lily's attention and signed. "They apologize for not realizing. They'll be back in a few minutes. Would you like me to interpret when they take our order, or would you prefer to write it down?" "Interpreting is fine," Lily signed, and then added with a small smile, "This is the strangest blind date I've ever been on. Usually by now I'm explaining what deaf means and why I can't just read lips perfectly." "Lip reading is exhausting," Evan signed. "My mom always said it was like trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces were missing and the other half kept moving. She did it when she had to, but in our house, we signed." In the corner booth, the 3 architects of this disaster sat in stunned silence. On the screen, Evan and Lily had opened their menus but kept glancing at each other, signing small comments and questions. They looked, Derek realized with a sick feeling, like 2 people on an actual date, a good date. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Marcus said quietly. "No shit," Derek snapped. Joel had gone pale. "We need to stop this. We need to shut it down right now." "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" Derek demanded. "Walk over there and announce we set up a fake date to try to humiliate Evan? Explain to that woman that she was just a prop in our plan to prove her date was an asshole? That'll go over great." "So what do we do?" Derek didn't have an answer. On the screen, Evan was laughing at something Lily had signed, his entire face bright with amusement. They'd only been at the table for maybe 5 minutes, and already they had the kind of easy rapport that some people never achieved after months of dating. "We watch," Derek said finally, his voice hollow. "We see how this plays out." But he already knew. Somewhere in his gut, below the bitterness and resentment, Derek already knew exactly how this was going to play out. And it wasn't going to expose Evan Brooks as a fraud. It was going to expose Derek as something much worse. The next 40 minutes were a masterclass in everything Derek had tried to convince himself Evan Brooks was faking. The server returned, and Evan smoothly interpreted the specials for Lily, his signing keeping perfect pace with the server's explanations. When Lily asked a question about one of the dishes, whether it could be made without cilantro, which she apparently hated, Evan relayed it without any of the awkwardness or impatience Derek would have expected from someone thrust into an interpreter role. He just did it, naturally, like it was the easiest thing in the world. They ordered. Lily chose the salmon, Evan went with the chicken marsala, and they both decided to split an appetizer of burrata after Evan signed enthusiastically about how good it was here. The server left, and Evan turned his full attention back to Lily, leaning forward slightly in that way people do when they're genuinely interested in the conversation. So, Sarah mentioned you're new to the city? Evan signed. How long have you been here? About 3 months, Lily replied. I moved from Portland for work. I'm a graphic designer. I got hired by a firm downtown that specializes in accessibility consulting. That sounds incredible, Evan signed. What made you want to specialize in accessibility? Lily's expression shifted into something more passionate, more animated. Because the digital world isn't built for everyone. Websites, apps, interfaces, so much of it assumes everyone can hear, everyone can see, everyone processes information the same way. I got tired of fighting with platforms that weren't designed with me in mind, so I decided to become someone who could actually change that. That's not just a job, Evan signed. That's a mission. It is, Lily confirmed. And your job? Sarah said you're in marketing? Strategy, technically, Evan signed. I help companies figure out how to tell their stories in ways that connect with people. It sounds more impressive than it actually is. A lot of spreadsheets and presentations, and trying to convince executives that what consumers say they want and what they actually respond to are two different things. Do you like it? Evan paused, considering the question with the kind of thoughtfulness that suggested he didn't get asked it often. Parts of it, he signed finally. I like solving problems. I like the creative aspect of building campaigns. But the corporate politics, he made a face that needed no translation. Lily laughed, a sound Derek could hear even through the camera feed, bright and uninhibited. You don't have to be deaf to hate office politics. True, Evan signed, grinning, though I imagine they're extra fun when people forget you can see them gossiping from across the room. Oh, the things I've seen, Lily signed, her eyes sparkling. The number of times people have said something rude about me right in front of me because they assumed I couldn't understand I could write a book. People are idiots, Evan signed bluntly, and Lily laughed again. The appetizer arrived, a beautiful white plate with burrata, heirloom tomatoes, and basil that looked like something from a magazine. Evan made sure Lily could see where it was positioned on the table, an unconscious awareness of sight lines that came from years of accommodating his mother. They both reached for it at the same time, then pulled back, then laughed at the awkwardness of the moment, in that way that only works when both people find it charming rather than uncomfortable. You first, Evan signed. We could share, Lily signed back. Novel concept on a date, I know. They ate, trading bites and comments, and the conversation kept flowing. Lily asked about Evan's mother, and he lit up talking about her, how fierce she was, how she'd fought the school district to get proper accommodations for him and his younger brother, how she'd taught them that being deaf wasn't a disability, but just a different way of experiencing the world. She sounds amazing, Lily signed. She is, Evan confirmed. She's actually the reason I'm so careful about accessibility in my work. If a campaign we're creating doesn't account for deaf consumers or blind consumers or people with any number of different needs, I push back. Sometimes it makes me unpopular with clients who just want the cheapest, fastest option, but, he shrugged, some things are worth being unpopular for. In the corner booth, Joel had his head in his hands. He's not faking, he said quietly. None of this is fake. This is just who he is. Derek didn't respond. He couldn't. Because Joel was right, and admitting that out loud would mean confronting the enormity of what they'd done, what they'd tried to do. On screen, the conversation had shifted to Portland, and Lily was describing her favorite spots in her old city with the kind of nostalgic fondness people have for places they loved but left. Evan asked questions, good questions, specific questions, and actually listened to the answers. He didn't interrupt, didn't redirect the conversation back to himself, didn't check his phone even once. He was, Derek realized with something close to despair, a genuinely good date. Tell me about your daughter, Lily signed when there was a natural pause. Sarah mentioned you have a little girl. Something changed in Evan's expression. Not closed off, but softer. Vulnerable in a way he hadn't been yet. Maisie, he signed, and even through the grainy camera footage, Derek could see the love there. She's 7. She's everything. How old was she when... Lily hesitated, her signs careful. Sarah mentioned you're widowed. I hope it's okay to ask. It's okay, Evan signed, though Derek noticed he took a moment before continuing. Maisie was 3 when Jen died. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. His hands moved precisely, but there was weight in every gesture. One minute we were a family of 3 planning Maisie's 4th birthday party. The next, I was a single father trying to explain to a preschooler why mommy wasn't coming home. "I'm so sorry," Lily signed, and the inadequacy of the phrase showed in her expression. "It's been 4 years," Evan signed. "Time doesn't make it better exactly, but it makes it different. Maisie's doing well. She's in 2nd grade now, reading at a 4th grade level, obsessed with dinosaurs and sparkly things in equal measure. We've built a life, just the 2 of us. It's not the life I planned, but it's ours." "That must be lonely sometimes," Lily signed gently. "Being everything for someone." Evan's smile was sad and honest. "It is, but she's worth it. She's worth everything." The main courses arrived, interrupting the moment. The server set down plates with a flourish, explained something about the preparation, and departed. Evan interpreted the whole thing for Lily without missing a beat, even though Derek could see something raw in his expression, the kind of vulnerability that comes from talking about losses that still hurt. They ate in comfortable silence for a few moments, and then Lily set down her fork and signed, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you agree to this date? Not—" She hastened to clarify. "I don't mean it like that. I mean, you're obviously a great catch. You could date anyone. Sarah said you haven't really dated since your wife died. So why now? Why me?" Evan took his time responding, cutting a piece of chicken with careful precision before setting down his utensils and meeting Lily's eyes. "Honestly," he signed, "I almost didn't. When Sarah suggested it, my first instinct was to say no. I've said no to every setup attempt for 4 years. But something about the way she described you. She didn't just tell me you were smart and accomplished, though you're obviously both. She told me you were kind. She told me that you volunteer teaching sign language classes on weekends, that you remembered her birthday when no one else in the office did, that you always leave detailed comments on new designers' portfolios to help them improve." Lily looked stunned. "Sarah told you all that?" "She wanted me to know who you were," Evan signed, "not just what you looked like or what you did for work. And I thought, maybe someone who leads with kindness is someone worth meeting, even if it scared me." "Does this scare you?" Lily asked. "Being here?" "Terrifies me," Evan admitted. "I haven't been on a date in 4 years. I haven't thought about opening my life up to someone new when my life is so focused on Maisie. But you know what's more terrifying? The idea of being so afraid of getting hurt again that I never try. That I model for my daughter that love is something you survive once and then hide from forever." Lily's eyes were bright, and Derek couldn't tell if she was about to cry or smile or both. "That's a good reason," she signed. "What about you?" Evan asked. "Sarah said this was your first date in a year. That seems impossible." Lily's expression turned wry. "It's not impossible when you're deaf. Dating is already vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there, hoping someone will like you, risking rejection. Now add the layer of having to explain my deafness, hoping they won't freak out or fetishize it, waiting to see if they'll actually communicate with me or just talk louder like that helps. Most people can't handle it, and honestly, I got tired of being someone's learning experience." "That sounds exhausting," Evan signed. "It is. So when Sarah said she wanted to set me up, I almost said no, but she was so insistent that you were different, that you were genuinely kind, and I thought, maybe one more try. Maybe this time will be different." "Is it?" Evan asked quietly. "Different?" Lily smiled, real and warm and tinged with wonder. "You signed fluently. You've made the server include me naturally in every interaction. You asked about my work before asking about my deafness. You're treating me like a person, not a puzzle or a project or a burden. So yes, this is very, very different." They looked at each other across the table, and something passed between them that Derek couldn't name but recognized anyway. That spark of connection, of possibility, of 2 people realizing that maybe, against all odds, they'd found something real. "I need to tell you something," Evan signed suddenly, and Derek's pulse jumped. "And I need to tell you before this goes any further." Lily's expression grew cautious. "Okay?" Evan glanced around the restaurant, his gaze sweeping the space with more attention than Derek would have liked. Then he leaned forward slightly and signed, "This date isn't what you think it is. It wasn't just a friend setting us up. Derek's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? Lily signed slowly. There's a camera, Evan signed, and Derek watched Lily's face go through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, fear. Someone set this up as a test. They wanted to see what I would do when I realized you were deaf. They expected me to panic or leave or reveal that I'm not actually the person I pretend to be at work. Lily's hands moved jerkily. How do you know this? Because I saw them setting up the camera this afternoon, Evan signed. I came by to drop off some documents for Catherine. She lives 2 blocks from here. I saw 3 of my coworkers from work installing a hidden camera on that shelf over there. He nodded toward the succulent arrangement, and Derek felt Marcus physically jolt beside him. He knew, Marcus whispered. The whole time he knew. I thought about confronting them, Evan continued, signing to Lily. I thought about canceling the date, about warning you so you wouldn't have to be part of whatever cruel game they were playing. But then I thought, why should I let them ruin something that could be good? Why should their cynicism dictate my life? So you came anyway, Lily signed, her hands trembling slightly, knowing they'd be watching, knowing this was a trap. I came because Sarah told me about a woman I wanted to meet, Evan signed. The trap was for me, not you. And I decided I wasn't going to let 3 bitter men with cameras determine whether I got to meet someone extraordinary. Lily sat back in her chair, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I'm part of their test. They used me as what? As bait? As a prop? Yes, Evan signed honestly. And I'm so sorry. You deserve better than that. You deserve better than being reduced to a challenge someone has to overcome. Better than being someone's gotcha moment. If you want to leave right now, I understand completely. For a long moment, Lily didn't move. Derek watched her face cycle through emotions: hurt, anger, humiliation. She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks, and Derek felt something twist in his chest that might have been shame. Then Lily picked up her napkin, wiped her eyes, and signed with deliberate precision. I'm not leaving. Evan blinked. You're not? No, Lily signed. Because if I leave, they win. They get to feel justified in their cruelty, get to tell themselves I was the problem and you failed the test. But you didn't fail, did you? You saw their trap and walked into it anyway because you chose kindness over cynicism. You chose to meet me as a person, not a problem. So no, I'm not leaving. We're going to finish this date, finish this meal, and we're going to have a wonderful time despite the fact that someone is watching us. And then she paused, her expression hardening in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying. And then, she signed, we're going to make them very, very sorry they ever thought this was a good idea. Evan's smile was something fierce and proud. You're amazing. I'm furious, Lily corrected. But yes, also amazing. They shared a look that was half laughter, half rage, and then Evan raised his wine glass. Lily picked up hers, and they clinked them together in a silent toast to resilience, to defiance, to refusing to let other people's ugliness poison something beautiful before it even had a chance to bloom. In the corner booth, Derek closed his eyes. We're so fucked, he said. Nobody disagreed. The rest of the meal unfolded like a performance neither of them had rehearsed, but both executed perfectly. Evan and Lily continued their conversation with an ease that seemed impossible given what they now both knew. That 3 pairs of hostile eyes were watching their every move. That this entire evening had been designed as an ambush. That they were refusing to be victims of someone else's cruelty by the simple act of enjoying each other's company. They talked about books. Lily was reading a biography of Frida Kahlo, and Evan confessed he'd never gotten through more than 50 pages of any biography because he always felt like he was intruding on someone's private pain. They discussed travel. Lily had spent 6 months in Japan teaching English after college and described the particular beauty of Tokyo's deaf community, how sign language had its own regional dialects, just like spoken language. Evan talked about a disastrous family trip to Disney World when Maisie was 5, how she'd been so overwhelmed by the crowds and noise that they'd spent half the vacation in the hotel pool instead of the parks. Best vacation ever, according to her, Evan signed with a grin. Turns out my daughter doesn't care about meeting princesses. She just wanted to practice her cannonballs. Smart kid, Lily signed back. Princesses are overrated. Cannonballs are forever. They laughed together, and to anyone watching who didn't know better, they looked exactly like what they were supposed to be. Two people on a first date that was going exceptionally well. The servers who rotated through their section smiled at them warmly, charmed by the way Evan interpreted everything with such natural fluency, by how Lily's whole face lit up when she laughed. A couple at a nearby table actually leaned over between courses to tell them they made a beautiful pair. But underneath the warmth, underneath the genuine connection that was somehow blooming despite everything, both of them carried the knowledge of the camera, of the men watching, of the intended humiliation that had transformed into something neither of them had expected. In the corner booth, Derek had long since stopped looking at his phone screen. He couldn't bear it anymore. Watching Evan be exactly who Derek had insisted he wasn't, watching this woman they'd used as a prop become a real person with depth and humor and strength. Marcus kept muttering under his breath, a steady stream of, "Oh God," and "What have we done?" that Joel had stopped trying to respond to. Joel himself looked physically ill, his untouched beer now warm and flat, his face the color of old paper. "We have to tell Catherine," Joel said suddenly. "Before they do. We have to get ahead of this." "And say what?" Derek demanded, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "That we set up an elaborate scheme to humiliate our coworker and it backfired? That we used a deaf woman as bait in our trap? That'll go over great with HR. So what's the alternative?" Joel shot back. "We wait until Evan reports us? Until he shows her the footage from our camera? We're already finished, Derek. At least if we come clean first, maybe nothing," Derek interrupted. "Maybe we're just finished either way." Marcus had gone very quiet, staring at his phone screen where Evan and Lily were signing to each other over dessert. They'd ordered the chocolate torte to share, and Lily was telling some story that involved elaborate hand gestures and had Evan laughing so hard he had to wipe his eyes. "He's happy," Marcus said softly. "Look at him. When's the last time any of us saw Evan look that happy?" "Don't," Derek warned. "Don't what? Don't point out that we tried to destroy something good because we were jealous? Don't acknowledge that we're the villains here?" "We're not villains," Derek insisted, but the words rang hollow even to his own ears. "We were just trying to To what?" Joel interrupted. "To prove Evan was fake?" "Mission accomplished, Derek. We proved he's real. We proved we're the fake ones." The truth of it sat between them like a fourth person at their booth, uninvited and impossible to ignore. They had built an entire conspiracy on the foundation of Derek's certainty that nobody could be as consistently kind, as genuinely decent as Evan Brooks appeared to be. They had convinced themselves that catching him in a moment of weakness would vindicate their resentment, would prove that his success was undeserved, that their own failures to advance weren't about their lack of merit, but about Evan's superior skill at deception. Instead, they'd proven only their own capacity for cruelty. The server brought the check to table 12, and Evan reached for it immediately before Lily could protest. They had a brief, playful argument conducted entirely in sign language. Lily insisting they should split it, Evan maintaining that since he'd chosen the restaurant he should pay, Lily pointing out that logic made no sense, and she was perfectly capable of paying for herself. Eventually, they compromised on Evan paying for dinner and Lily paying for dessert and coffee at whatever place they went to next. Next. The word landed like a stone in Derek's stomach. They were planning to continue the date, to leave the restaurant and its hidden camera and go somewhere else, somewhere Derek couldn't watch, couldn't control, couldn't document. The evening was spinning further and further out of his grasp. Evan signed something to Lily that made her blush and smile, then pulled out his wallet. As he waited for the server to return with the receipt, he glanced around the restaurant one more time. His eyes swept past the corner where Derek, Marcus, and Joel sat hidden, past the other diners finishing their meals, and landed on the succulent arrangement on the shelf. For just a moment, Evan looked directly at the camera. His expression was calm, almost serene, but there was something in his eyes that made Derek's blood run cold. It wasn't anger, it wasn't triumph, it was something closer to pity, and somehow that was infinitely worse. Then Evan turned back to Lily, signed something that made her gather her purse, and stood to help her with her chair. They were leaving. "What do we do?" Marcus hissed. "Nothing," Derek said flatly. "We do nothing. We go home, we delete the footage, and we never speak of this again. You think they're just going to forget about it? Joel demanded. You think Evan's going to pretend this didn't happen? I think, Derek said slowly, that Evan is going to do whatever Evan decides to do, and we have absolutely no control over it. So yes, we go home. We wait. And we hope we still have jobs on Monday. They watched on the screen as Evan and Lily made their way through the restaurant toward the exit, moving close together, comfortable in each other's space, in the way people get when a date has gone well. At the door, Lily turned to Evan and signed something. He responded and she nodded, and then they were gone, disappearing into the Friday night crowd outside. The three men sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Marcus pushed his phone across the table to Derek. Delete it, he said. All of it. I don't want any record of what we tried to do. Derek picked up the phone, pulled up the camera's interface, and hesitated. The footage was all there. Nearly 2 hours of video documenting their failed attempt at sabotage, their miscalculation, their fundamental misunderstanding of who Evan Brooks actually was. Part of him wanted to keep it, to study it later, to try to figure out where exactly his certainty had calcified into delusion. But Marcus was right. This footage was evidence of nothing but their own ugliness. Derek deleted it. Every file, every backup, every trace of the camera feed. Then he handed Marcus his phone back and stood. I'm going home, he said. I suggest you both do the same. He didn't wait for a response. He left $40 on the table to cover their tab, walked out of the Martinez Grill without looking back, and stepped into the cool evening air that smelled like rain and regret. Derek didn't go straight home. He couldn't face his empty apartment yet, couldn't bear the thought of sitting alone with what he'd done. So he walked, block after block through the downtown streets, past couples holding hands and groups of friends laughing outside bars, past all the normal Friday night happiness that seemed to exist in a different universe from the one he currently occupied. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Marcus. Joel wants to go to HR first thing Monday. Thinks it's the right thing to do. What do you think? Derek didn't respond. He didn't know what the right thing to do was anymore. Maybe there wasn't a right thing. Maybe some mistakes were too fundamental to correct, and all you could do was live with the consequences. He found himself at Riverside Park, the small green space that bordered the downtown area, and sat on a bench overlooking the water. It was nearly 10 o'clock now, and the park was mostly empty except for a few joggers and a couple necking on a blanket by the waterline. Derek watched the lights from the buildings across the river shimmer on the dark water and tried to trace back the exact moment when his frustration with Evan had metastasized into something poisonous enough to justify what they'd done. Was it the promotion announcement? No, it had started before that. Maybe it was the Johnson account, 6 months ago, when Evan had somehow salvaged a presentation that Derek had botched, staying up all night to rework the strategy and delivering it so smoothly that the client had never known anything had gone wrong. Derek should have been grateful, but instead he'd been furious that Evan had made it look easy, had made Derek's failure invisible while somehow making himself look even more competent. Or maybe it went back further, to the company retreat 18 months ago, when Evan had organized a kayaking trip and spent the entire afternoon patiently teaching Derek the proper stroke technique, never once making Derek feel stupid for needing help, just offering guidance with the same easy kindness he offered everything else. That was what had really stuck in Derek's throat, he realized now. Not Evan's competence or his success, or even his seemingly effortless likability. It was the kindness. The unrelenting, unshakable, apparently genuine kindness that Derek couldn't match, and couldn't trust, and couldn't forgive Evan for possessing. Because if Evan's kindness was real, then what did that make Derek? His phone buzzed again. Another text, but not from Marcus this time. It was from an unknown number, but the message made Derek's stomach drop. We should talk. Monday morning, 8 a.m., my office. Come alone. Evan. So, Evan had his number. Probably got it from the company directory. And Evan wanted to talk. Derek typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, I'll be there. The reply came almost immediately. Thank you. Thank you. Even now, even after what Derek had tried to do to him, Evan Brooks was thanking him for agreeing to a meeting. Derek wanted to laugh or scream or throw his phone in the river. Instead, he just sat there, watching the water and trying to imagine what he could possibly say on Monday morning that would make any of this right. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and insomnia. Derek called in sick to a brewery tour he'd planned with friends, ignored calls from his parents, and spent most of Saturday and Sunday lying on his couch watching television without processing any of it. His mind kept replaying the footage he'd deleted. Evan's face when he'd recognized that Lily was deaf, the fluid grace of his signing, the genuine warmth in his eyes when he'd looked at her. The way Lily had cried when she'd learned about the trap but had chosen to stay anyway, to finish the date, to refuse to be reduced to a prop in someone else's ugly game. Marcus texted him Saturday afternoon. Joel told his girlfriend what we did. She says we're terrible people. She's right. Derek didn't respond. Sunday evening, he finally forced himself to prepare for Monday. He showered, shaved, ironed a shirt. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back, drawn, exhausted, hollow-eyed with shame. This was what happened, he thought, when you built your identity on tearing someone else down. This was what happened when cynicism became your default setting and you forgot that sometimes people were just good because they chose to be. He arrived at the office at 7:45 Monday morning, earlier than necessary, but unable to bear waiting at home any longer. The building was quiet, just a few early risers scattered through the open-plan workspace. The lights in Evan's office were already on. Derek stood outside the closed door for a full minute, gathering courage he wasn't sure he possessed, before finally knocking. "Come in," Evan's voice called. Derek opened the door and stepped into what felt like his own execution. Evan's office was modest despite his director title. A desk, 2 chairs, a bookshelf filled with marketing textbooks and strategy guides, a few framed photos. Derek's eyes caught on one of them, a little girl with dark curls and Evan's smile, holding up a drawing of what might have been a dinosaur or might have been a very lumpy dog. Maisie, obviously. The daughter Evan was raising alone, the child who depended entirely on this man Derek had tried to humiliate. "Sit down, Derek," Evan said, gesturing to one of the chairs across from his desk. Derek sat. He felt like a student called to the principal's office, and the worst part was that he deserved every bit of it. Evan was dressed in his usual work attire, slacks, button-down shirt, no tie. He looked tired, like maybe he hadn't slept much either, but his expression was calm, controlled. He had a manila folder on his desk, and Derek wondered with a spike of fear if Evan had somehow recovered the deleted footage, if he'd been smart enough to anticipate that Derek would try to erase the evidence. "I'm going to make this very simple," Evan said, and his voice carried none of the warmth Derek had heard at the restaurant Friday night. This was director voice, professional and cool. "I know what you, Marcus, and Joel did. I know you set up a hidden camera, that you arranged a date you hoped would expose me as a fraud, that you used a woman I'd never met as an unwitting instrument of your sabotage." "Yes?" Derek swallowed hard. "Yes. I could report this to Catherine in HR right now. I have sufficient evidence. I took photos of you setting up the camera. I have the reservation record showing you made the booking, and I'm fairly certain if they examined your devices, they'd find deleted files that could be recovered." Evan paused. "I could end your career here with a single conversation. You understand that?" "Yes," Derek said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not going to do that." Derek's head snapped up. "What?" "I'm not going to report you," Evan repeated. "Any of you. I'm going to give you a choice instead." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on Derek's. "You can go to Catherine and HR yourselves, today, this morning, and explain what you did and why you did it. You can be honest about your motivations, accept whatever consequences come from that honesty, and try to rebuild some semblance of professional integrity. Or, Derek prompted when Evan didn't continue. "Or you can keep silent, pretend this never happened, and live with the knowledge of what you tried to do. I won't report you. I won't retaliate. I'll continue working with you professionally, and we'll all pretend we don't know what kind of people you really are." Evan's expression was unreadable. "But you'll know. Every time you see me in the hallway, every time we're in the same meeting, every time someone compliments my work or talks about my integrity, you'll know what you tried to do and that you got away with it only because I chose mercy over justice." The weight of it settled over Derek like a physical thing. Evan wasn't offering him a way out. He was offering him a choice between two different kinds of prison, one public and career-ending, one private and permanent.
Why? Derek asked hoarsely. Why would you give us a choice? Why not just destroy us the way we tried to destroy you? Evan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, almost sad. Because I have a 7-year-old daughter who asks me every night to tell her about my day. And I want to be able to tell her that I chose to be kind even when people gave me every reason not to be. I want to model for her that revenge might feel good in the moment, but integrity feels good forever. He picked up the manila folder and slid it across the desk to Derek. That's everything I have documenting what you did. I'm giving it to you. If you choose to go to HR, you can use it to support your confession. If you choose to stay silent, you can destroy it. Either way, after you leave this office, I'm done with this. I'm moving forward, and you three need to figure out how you're going to do the same. Derek opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were printed photos of him and Marcus setting up the camera Friday afternoon. Screenshots of the reservation confirmation, a timeline of events. Everything Evan had said, meticulously documented. Everything Derek would need to hang himself if he chose honesty. What about Lily? Derek asked quietly. Does she know you're doing this? Something shifted in Evan's expression, a flicker of warmth breaking through the professional coolness. Lily and I talked all weekend, long talks, good talks. She was angrier than I was, actually. She wanted me to report all three of you, wanted to contact a lawyer about harassment and invasion of privacy, but I asked her to let me handle it my way, and she trusted me enough to agree. You're still seeing her, Derek said. It wasn't a question. I am, Evan confirmed, and now his voice carried that warmth Derek had heard through the camera. We're having dinner again Wednesday. She's going to meet Maisie next weekend if things keep going well.
What you three did was cruel and invasive and wrong, but the unintended consequence is that you introduced me to someone extraordinary. So in the strangest, most twisted way possible, I suppose I should thank you. The words were like a knife between Derek's ribs. They'd tried to destroy Evan and had instead given him something beautiful. The universe, Derek thought distantly, had a vicious sense of irony. I need to think, Derek said, standing on unsteady legs, about what to do. You have until end of business today, Evan said, his voice returning to its professional neutrality. After that, the window closes. You keep your silence, or you don't. But you decide today. Derek nodded mutely, clutching the folder to his chest, and stumbled toward the door. Derek, Evan called as Derek's hand touched the doorknob. Derek turned back. Evan was watching him with something that might have been sympathy. I hope you choose honesty, not for my sake, or the company's sake, but for yours. Living with this kind of secret, it hollows you out from the inside, trust me. I know. Derek left the office without responding. He made it to the bathroom, locked himself in a stall, and sat there for 20 minutes trying to remember how to breathe. By 10 o'clock, all three of them were sitting in Catherine Morrison's office. Derek had called Marcus and Joel, told them they needed to talk, and within 15 minutes they'd collectively decided that Evan was right. They couldn't live with this. They couldn't spend the rest of their careers walking past him in hallways, sitting in meetings with him, pretending they were decent people who'd simply lost a professional competition fair and square. Catherine listened to their confession with an expression that grew progressively more horrified. When they finished, when Derek had laid out the whole ugly plan, the camera, the setup, the intention behind it all, she sat back in her chair and stared at them like they were strangers who'd somehow infiltrated her office. You used a woman's disability as bait, she said finally, her voice very quiet and very dangerous. You tried to humiliate one of my best employees because you were jealous of his promotion. You installed surveillance equipment in a private business without permission. Do I have that right? Yes, Joel said, because someone had to say it. And Evan knows about all of this? He documented everything, Derek confirmed, sliding the folder across her desk. He gave us the choice to come forward or stay silent. We're choosing to come forward. Catherine opened the folder, reviewed its contents, and closed it with careful precision. You understand that this is grounds for immediate termination, for all three of you. Yes, they said in unison. You understand that depending on what Lily Hart decides, there could be legal consequences beyond losing your jobs. Yes. Catherine rubbed her temples like she was fighting off a migraine. I need to consult with HR and with our legal team. I need to speak with Evan and determine what his preferred outcome is, since he's the primary victim here. I need to contact Ms. Hart and ensure she understands her rights. And I need to figure out how to explain to the executive team that 3 of my employees conspired to sabotage a 4th using methods that are potentially criminal. She stood, and they all automatically stood with her. You're all suspended without pay pending investigation. I need your badges, your laptops, and your access cards. You'll be contacted within 48 hours about next steps. Do not attempt to contact Evan. Do not attempt to contact Ms. Hart. Do not discuss this situation with any other employees. Are we clear? They nodded, surrendered their badges and equipment, and filed out of her office like condemned men walking to the gallows. In the elevator down to the lobby, Marcus started crying. Joel stared at the floor. Derek just felt numb. I'm sorry, Derek said as they reached the ground floor. This was my idea. My certainty, my bitterness. You guys just went along with it. This is on me. We all made choices, Joel said quietly. We all chose to be cruel instead of kind. Nobody forced us. They stood on the sidewalk outside Brightline Solutions, 3 men who'd worked together for years, who'd bonded over shared frustrations and office politics, who'd convinced each other that their resentment was justified and their actions were righteous. The morning was bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that belonged to people whose lives weren't actively collapsing around them. What do we do now? Marcus asked. Derek thought about Evan's words, about choosing mercy, about modeling integrity for his daughter, about the weight of carrying secrets. He thought about Lily's tears and her choice to stay, to refuse to be reduced to a prop, to finish the date with grace and dignity. He thought about how badly he'd misread everything, how completely he'd miscalculated, how thoroughly he'd revealed not Evan's flaws, but his own. Now, Derek said slowly, we figure out how to be better people than we were on Friday. Even if it's too late to save our careers, maybe it's not too late to save ourselves. They parted ways without another word. Derek walked home in the spring sunshine, unemployed and ashamed and carrying the weight of consequences he'd chosen for himself. But underneath the shame, underneath the fear about his future and his finances and his reputation, there was something else. Relief. He'd told the truth. He'd faced what he'd done. He'd chosen honesty over self-preservation. And while it didn't fix anything, while it didn't undo the harm or erase his actions, it was something, a starting point. The first step on a very long road to becoming the kind of person who didn't need to tear others down to feel successful. That evening, Derek received a text from an unknown number. Different from Evan's, he realized after a moment. The message was brief. Thank you for being honest. I know it didn't come easy. That matters. Lily. Derek stared at the text for a long time. Then he typed back, I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better. The response came quickly. Yes, I did. But everyone deserves the chance to be better than their worst moment. Even you. Don't waste it. Derek saved the message, turned off his phone, and sat in the growing darkness of his apartment. Outside, the city continued its evening routine, people coming home from work, heading out for dinner, living their lives, unaware that somewhere in their midst, a man was learning the hardest lesson of his adult life. That kindness wasn't weakness, that integrity wasn't performance, that some people really were as good as they seemed, and the inability to believe that said more about your own heart than theirs, and that sometimes the greatest trap you could set was the one you built for yourself. 3 weeks had passed since the confession, and Evan Brooks was discovering that vindication felt nothing like he'd imagined it would. The investigation had been swift and thorough. Catherine had brought in HR, legal had reviewed everything, and by the end of that first week, the decision had been made. Derek, Marcus, and Joel were terminated for cause. No severance, no references, just a quiet removal from the employee directory and the kind of hushed whispers that followed scandal through corporate corridors. Evan had been asked multiple times what outcome he preferred, and each time he'd given the same answer, whatever Catherine and HR deemed appropriate. He wouldn't advocate for leniency, but he wouldn't push for additional punishment either. He'd meant what he'd told Derek about moving forward, about choosing mercy, about wanting to model integrity for Maisie. But knowing he'd done the right thing didn't make the aftermath any easier to navigate. His coworkers treated him differently now, some with increased respect, others with a wariness that suggested they were recalculating their own behavior around him. A few had apologized for not speaking up sooner, for sensing something was wrong with how Derek's group had talked about Evan, but not wanting to get involved in office politics. Evan had accepted their apologies with the same grace he brought to everything, but privately he wondered how many other people had quietly resented him, had questioned whether his kindness was genuine, had waited for him to fail so they could feel better about their own limitations. The promotion he'd earned felt different now, too. The corner office, the increased responsibility, the seat at the executive table, all of it was still his, but it carried the weight of knowing that his success had bred such bitterness in others that they'd orchestrated his humiliation. Catherine had pulled him aside after the terminations were finalized and asked if he was okay, really okay. And Evan had told her the truth. He didn't know yet. But there was one unequivocally good thing that had come from that horrible Friday night, and her name was Lily Hart. Their second date had been Wednesday, as planned, at a small coffee shop Lily loved in the Arts District. They'd talked for 3 hours, losing track of time the way people do when conversation flows like water, natural and necessary. Evan had told her about the confrontation with Derek, about giving them the choice, about how strange it felt to be simultaneously vindicated and saddened by the whole situation. Lily had listened with the intense focus she brought to everything, and then she'd signed something that had stayed with Evan ever since. You can be right and still be hurt. Those things don't cancel each other out. Their third date had been Saturday, a walk through the botanical gardens where they'd spent as much time watching Lily photograph spring blooms as they had talking. She had an artist's eye, composing shots with careful attention to light and shadow, and Evan had found himself captivated by the way she moved through the world, by how much beauty she noticed that others walked past without seeing. By their fourth date the following Tuesday, dinner at a Thai place Evan loved, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm of communication that felt like something they'd been doing for years rather than weeks. Evan would speak and sign simultaneously in public spaces, a habit so ingrained from childhood that he barely noticed he was doing it. Lily would catch his eye across a table and sign small asides, private jokes, observations about other diners that made him laugh into his pad thai. And now it was Saturday again, nearly a month since that first trap of a date, and Evan was about to take the biggest step he'd taken since Jen died. He was introducing Lily to Maisie. He told Maisie about Lily earlier in the week, sitting on the edge of his daughter's bed during their nightly routine. Maisie had listened with the solemn attention she gave to important announcements, her stuffed triceratops clutched to her chest. "So she's your girlfriend?" Maisie had asked, testing out the word. "I think so," Evan had said carefully. "We really like each other, but I wanted you to meet her first because you're the most important person in my life. If you don't like her, or if it feels weird, we can slow down, okay?" Maisie had considered this with the gravity of a federal judge reviewing evidence. "Does she like dinosaurs?" "I don't know. We haven't discussed dinosaurs yet." "That's a pretty big oversight, Dad," Maisie had said, so serious that Evan had to bite back a smile. "What have you even been talking about?" "Books and art and her work and my work and what makes us laugh," Evan had explained. "But you're right. We should probably cover dinosaurs too." "I'll ask her," Maisie had decided. "And if she says the wrong answer about whether T-Rex had feathers, we'll know she's not the one." Now it was Saturday morning, and Evan was making pancakes, his signature Saturday morning tradition with Maisie, while trying not to be obvious about checking the clock every 3 minutes. Lily was coming over at 10 for what Evan had carefully framed as a casual hangout, though they all knew it was anything but casual. This was the meeting that would determine whether what he and Lily were building could exist in the same space as the life he'd built with his daughter. Maisie was at the kitchen table, allegedly working on a drawing, but actually watching Evan with the shrewd observation skills of a 7-year-old who knew something important was happening. "You're nervous?" she announced. "I'm not nervous," Evan lied, flipping a pancake with more force than necessary. "You're making the pancakes too perfect. You always make them weird shapes when you're relaxed. These are all circles." Evan looked down at the griddle and realized she was right. Normally, he made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs or hearts or abstract blobs that Maisie would turn into faces with strategic application of blueberries and syrup. Today they were perfect, uniform circles because he was concentrating too hard on everything. Okay, maybe I'm a little nervous, he admitted. Is that okay? It's okay, Maisie said generously. I'm nervous too. What if she doesn't like me? Evan abandoned the pancakes and crouched down next to his daughter's chair. Maisie Elizabeth Brooks, listen to me. There is no universe in which someone meets you and doesn't like you. You are smart and funny and kind and interesting, and anyone who gets to know you is lucky, including Lily. But what if she's only pretending to like you so she can be mean to me later, like in Cinderella? Evan's heart cracked a little. He'd tried so hard to protect Maisie from his grief after Jen died, to make sure she felt secure and loved and safe, despite losing her mother so young. But clearly she'd absorbed more anxiety about their small family unit than he'd realized. The fear that someone new might disrupt what they'd built, might hurt them the way loss had already hurt them, was perfectly rational for a child who'd learned too early that the people you love can disappear. Lily isn't like that, Evan said softly, but I understand why you're worried. How about this? You don't have to decide today whether you like her or trust her. You can take your time, get to know her, and if at any point you feel uncomfortable, you tell me. Your feelings matter most here, always. Maisie nodded slowly, then returned her attention to her drawing. Is she really deaf? Like Grandma? Yes, just like Grandma. So we'll use sign language with her the way we do with Grandma. My signing is getting better, Maisie said with the confidence of a child who'd been practicing. Grandma said I'm almost fluent now. You are, Evan confirmed, and Lily is going to love talking with you. The doorbell rang at 9:58, which told Evan that Lily had probably been waiting outside for a few minutes, not wanting to be too early, but also not wanting to be late. He appreciated the consideration even as his stomach did gymnastics. She's here, Maisie whispered, suddenly looking very small in her chair. We've got this, Evan told her, then went to answer the door. Lily stood on his porch wearing jeans and a soft yellow sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, holding a small gift bag and looking nearly as nervous as Evan felt. When she saw him, her face broke into a smile that made everything feel a little more manageable. Hi, she signed and spoke simultaneously. Hi, Evan signed back. Come in. Maisie's in the kitchen. We're having pancakes if you're hungry. I'm always hungry, Lily signed, stepping inside. She'd been to Evan's house once before, briefly, when he'd needed to pick up some documents for work. But this was different. This was being invited into his space, his life, his carefully constructed world with his daughter. They walked to the kitchen together, and Evan watched Maisie's face as Lily came into view. His daughter sat up straighter, her artist's eyes taking in every detail. Lily's gentle expression, her careful movements, the gift bag she carried. Maisie, Evan signed and spoke. This is Lily. Lily, this is my daughter Maisie. Lily set the gift bag on the counter and then signed with a warm smile. Hello, Maisie. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your dad talks about you constantly. Maisie's eyes went wide. She looked at Evan for confirmation, and he nodded encouragingly. Then, with careful deliberation, Maisie signed back. Hi, do you like dinosaurs? Evan had to cover his mouth to hide his grin as Lily pretended to think very seriously about this question. I think dinosaurs are fascinating, Lily signed, especially when I learned that birds are actually modern dinosaurs. So every time I see a pigeon, I'm technically looking at a tiny T-Rex descendant. Maisie's face lit up like someone had turned on a spotlight inside her. That's right, she signed enthusiastically, abandoning the careful formality she'd been trying to maintain. Birds are dinosaurs. Most people don't know that. And do you know about the feathers? Because T-Rex definitely had feathers, at least as babies, and anyone who says they didn't is wrong. I did know about the feathers, Lily signed, and you're absolutely right. The evidence is very clear. Dad, she knows about the feathers, Maisie announced, as if this single fact had resolved any doubt about Lily's character. I heard, Evan signed, feeling something tight in his chest begin to unwind. Now, does anyone want pancakes before they get cold? They settled around the kitchen table, and Evan served pancakes while Lily pulled out what was in the gift bag, a beautiful hardcover book about women in science, featuring profiles of female paleontologists, astronomers, engineers, and marine biologists. It was thoughtful without being too much, age-appropriate, and clearly chosen with care. "This is amazing," Maisie signed, already flipping through the pages. "Look, Dad, this woman discovered 5 new dinosaur species in Argentina." "That's Dr. Sereno," Lily signed. "She spent 20 years excavating in some of the most remote places on Earth. I thought you might like reading about real scientists who do the kind of work you might want to do someday." Maisie clutched the book to her chest the same way she clutched her stuffed triceratops, and Evan felt his throat tighten with emotion. Lily had somehow managed in 30 seconds to make his daughter feel seen, understood, and encouraged in her passions. She hadn't brought a generic gift or something cutesy meant to win Maisie over with sugar rather than substance. She'd brought something that said, "I pay attention to who you are and what matters to you." Breakfast unfolded with an ease that surprised all of them. Maisie peppered Lily with questions about being deaf, about what school was like for her, about whether she ever wished she could hear. Lily answered honestly, explaining that she'd been born deaf and didn't miss something she'd never experienced, that there were challenges, but also beauty in experiencing the world through sight and touch and vibration rather than sound. "Music must be so different for you," Maisie signed thoughtfully. "It is," Lily confirmed. "I feel music through vibrations, through the rhythm in the floor or in my chest. I went to a concert once where they had special platforms that amplified the bass so deaf audience members could feel every beat. It was incredible." "That sounds really cool," Maisie signed. "Different isn't bad, it's just different." "Exactly," Lily signed, and the look she gave Maisie was full of approval and something deeper, recognition, maybe, of a child who'd been raised to understand that different was just another way of being, not something to fear or fix. After breakfast, Maisie showed Lily her room with the pride of a museum curator presenting a prized collection. Evan followed, watching as his daughter pointed out her rock collection, her dinosaur models, her drawings taped to every available wall surface. Lily examined everything with genuine interest, asking questions about where Maisie had found different rocks, which dinosaurs were her favorites, what inspired specific drawings. "This one is a night fury," Maisie signed, pointing to a drawing of a black dragon. "From How to Train Your Dragon. Have you seen it?" "I have," Lily signed. "I love that movie. I love that Toothless can't fly alone at first, and Hiccup can't walk without help, so they need each other. They're both different, both dealing with things that make life harder, but together they're stronger." Maisie stared at Lily with something close to awe, and Evan realized his daughter had just found someone who understood stories the way she did, not just as entertainment, but as frameworks for understanding the world, for processing feelings too big to name directly. "Do you want to help me with a drawing?" Maisie asked suddenly. "I'm working on a scene from the Cretaceous period, but I can't get the pteranodon wings right." "I would love to help," Lily signed. They spent the next hour on Maisie's floor, paper and colored pencils spread around them, working on the drawing together while Evan watched from the doorway. He'd expected to feel protective, to hover, to monitor every interaction for signs that Maisie was uncomfortable or that Lily was overwhelmed. Instead, he felt something else entirely. He felt like he was watching two people who already understood each other, finding the language to express it. Lily showed Maisie how to think about wing structure, how to observe the way fabric or paper folded to understand how pteranodon wings might have moved. Maisie demonstrated her technique for creating texture with layered, colored pencil strokes, teaching Lily the way a child teaches when they're confident in their expertise. They laughed when a pencil rolled away across the floor, signed rapid-fire conversations about color choices and composition, and created something together that neither of them could have made alone. At one point, Maisie looked up at Evan and signed, "I like her, Dad." Evan's eyes burned with sudden tears. He signed back, "I like her too, sweetie." "No, I mean, I really like her," Maisie clarified. "Like, I want her to come back. A lot." "I think that can be arranged," Evan signed, not trusting his voice for spoken words in that moment. When Lily finally left that afternoon, after lunch, after a walk to the park down the street, after Maisie had hugged her goodbye with the unselfconscious affection of a child who'd decided someone was safe, Evan closed the door and leaned against it, emotionally exhausted and happier than he'd been in 4 years.
Maisie appeared at his elbow. Dad, are you crying? Happy tears, Evan managed. Just happy tears.
Because Lily is perfect? Because you liked her? Because she was kind to you? Because... He trailed off, not sure how to explain to a 7-year-old that he'd been so afraid to let anyone new into their tightly held world, and watching it happen so naturally had cracked something open in his chest that he'd kept locked since Jen died. Because maybe we don't have to be just us forever, Maisie offered, her voice small but hopeful. Evan picked up his daughter and held her close. We will always be us, he said firmly. You and me, that's never going to change. But maybe our us can get a little bigger. Maybe there's room for more love without losing what we have. Would that be okay? Maisie nodded against his shoulder. I think Mom would like Lily, she whispered. It was the first time in months that Maisie had mentioned Jen unprompted, and Evan had to breathe through the wave of grief that never fully went away, just learned to coexist with joy. I think she would too, baby. I really think she would. That evening, after Maisie was asleep, Evan called Lily. She answered on the second ring, and even though he couldn't hear her, he could picture her settling into her couch, tucking her feet under her, smiling at her phone. He switched to video call and signed, "Thank you. For today. For being exactly who you are with her." She's incredible, Lily signed back, her face glowing even through the phone screen. Evan, that child is brilliant and kind and funny, and you've done such a beautiful job raising her. I'm terrified every day that I'm screwing it up, Evan admitted, that I'm not enough, that she needs more than I can give her, that losing Jen left a hole I can't fill no matter how hard I try. You're not screwing it up, Lily signed firmly. She's happy. She feels loved. She's confident enough to be herself and vulnerable enough to let new people in. Those things don't happen by accident. You did that. Evan felt his throat tighten again. Can I see you tomorrow? You can see me every day if you want, Lily signed, and there was no playing it cool, no pretending to be less interested than she was. Just honesty, clear and simple and terrifying in its openness. I want, Evan signed. I really, really want. They talked for another hour, about nothing and everything. About Maisie's drawings and Lily's project at work, and the way spring was slowly giving way to summer. When they finally said goodbye, Evan sat in his quiet living room and let himself feel it all. The fear and the hope, the grief and the joy, the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone matter again. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. It was the first contact he'd had with any of the 3 men since the terminations, and Evan almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm in therapy now, working through why I was so threatened by your kindness that I tried to destroy it. My therapist says I have to take responsibility for my actions and understand the harm I caused. So I'm telling you, I was wrong. Not just about the setup, but about everything. I convinced myself you were fake because believing you were real meant confronting how far I'd fallen from the person I wanted to be. I'm trying to be better. It won't fix what I did, but maybe it'll mean the next person who crosses my path won't get hurt by my insecurities. I hope you're happy. I mean that sincerely. Evan read the message 3 times. He thought about responding, thought about what he might say, but in the end he simply saved the message and set his phone aside. Marcus's journey toward being a better person wasn't Evan's responsibility. The apology was noted, but forgiveness, if it came at all, would take time. What mattered now was the life Evan was building, the promotion he'd earned, the daughter who was thriving, the woman who'd walked into his life through the ugliest of circumstances and had somehow become the first person since Jen who made him believe in the possibility of love again. On Sunday, Lily came over again, then Tuesday, then Friday. Within 2 weeks, she had her own drawer in Evan's bathroom, her favorite tea in his cupboard, a standing invitation to Saturday morning pancakes. Maisie took to calling her Lily in that unself-conscious way children adopt people into their worlds, asking when she'd be coming over, saving drawings to show her, requesting that Lily read bedtime stories in sign language because she liked the way Lily's hands moved. Within a month, they'd fallen into patterns that felt less like dating and more like building a life. Lily would come over after work some evenings, and they'd cook dinner together while Maisie did homework at the kitchen table. Evan would meet Lily for lunch on days when his schedule allowed it, stealing an hour in the middle of the workday to sit in a park and just be together. They went to museums, to movies with captions, to a deaf community event where Evan met some of Lily's friends and felt the particular joy of being surrounded by sign language, of watching Lily in her element. And slowly, carefully, they began to talk about the future in concrete terms. Not just someday or maybe, but actual plans, actual possibilities. Lily's lease was up in 3 months, and one night, while Maisie was at a sleepover, curled up on Evan's couch with wine and takeout, Lily signed, "I don't want to renew it." "No?" Evan signed back. "I want to be here," Lily signed, the vulnerability clear in her expression. "With you and Maisie. If you want that? If it's not too fast. If—" Evan kissed her, cutting off the anxious spiral of qualifications. When he pulled back, he signed, "It's not too fast, it's exactly right. Move in with us." "Are you sure?" Lily signed. "This is a big step. Maisie asked me yesterday when you were going to live here all the time," Evan signed with a smile. "She's already picked out which drawer you get in her bathroom for when you need to help her with bath time. She's ready. I'm ready. The only question is whether you're ready." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I'm ready," she signed. "I'm so ready." They told Maisie the next morning over pancakes, the weird-shaped kind, because Evan was relaxed now, happy, no longer making everything perfect out of anxiety. Maisie's response was to leap out of her chair, hug Lily so hard she nearly knocked them both over, and then immediately start planning how they should decorate the house for what she called their family expansion celebration. "Can we get streamers?" Maisie signed enthusiastically. "And a cake? A big cake?" "We can absolutely get streamers and a cake," Lily agreed, laughing. "And we should probably tell Grandma," Maisie added, turning to Evan. "She's going to be really excited." She was right. When Evan called his mother that afternoon and explained, in sign language over video call, that he'd met someone, that she was deaf, that she was moving in, and that Maisie adored her, his mother cried happy tears and demanded to meet Lily immediately. They drove up to visit her the following weekend, making the 3-hour drive north to the small coastal town where Evan had grown up. His mother had been living alone since his father died 2 years earlier, and Evan had worried about her isolation, about whether she was lonely, about whether the deaf community in her small town was enough to keep her connected and engaged. But when they arrived, she threw open her door with the energy of someone half her age, pulled Lily into a hug before even properly greeting her, and signed, "Finally, another deaf person in this family." It was getting exhausting being the only one. His mother and Lily bonded instantly, falling into rapid conversation in ASL that Evan sometimes had to ask them to slow down so Maisie could follow. They talked about deaf culture, about navigating the hearing world, about the particular challenges and joys of relationships between deaf and hearing people. His mother pulled out old photo albums showing Evan as a child, his hands forming his first signs, his face bright with the joy of finally being able to communicate after months of frustrated crying. He was so relieved when he learned to sign, his mother told Lily, her signs full of memory and love. Before language, he would just scream because he couldn't tell me what he needed. But the moment he learned his first real signs, it was like watching him become himself. He hasn't stopped talking since. "Mom," Evan signed, embarrassed. "It's true," she insisted. "You were my chatty one." Your brother was quiet, thoughtful. But you wanted to tell me everything, every thought, every feeling, every observation. You still do. I love that about you. That night, after Maisie had fallen asleep in Evan's childhood bedroom, the 3 adults sat on his mother's back porch watching the ocean. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the water, and his mother sat between Evan and Lily, holding both their hands. "I'm glad you found each other," she signed with her free hand, switching between them so both could see. "Evan has been alone too long. Maisie needs more than just him, as wonderful as he is. And Lily, you deserve someone who sees all of you, not just your deafness." "He does," Lily signed back. "See all of me, I mean. He always has, from that very first night." His mother looked at Evan with a question in her eyes, and he realized he'd never fully explained how they'd met. So he told her the whole story, the trap, the camera, the intention behind it all. and how Lily's grace and his choice to show up anyway had transformed something ugly into something beautiful. When he finished, his mother was quiet for a long time. Then she signed, "Those men who tried to hurt you, they didn't understand something fundamental about kindness." "What's that?" Evan asked. "That it's not a strategy," she signed. "It's not something you deploy to get ahead or make people like you. It's just who you are, who I raised you to be. You're kind because you understand suffering, because you lost someone you loved, because you know what it's like to struggle. You're kind because you choose to be every single day, even when the world gives you every reason not to be." She turned to Lily. "And you? You could have walked away from that date the moment you learned it was a setup. But you stayed. You chose to see who Evan really was instead of letting other people's ugliness define the moment. That takes tremendous courage." "Or tremendous stubbornness," Lily signed with a small smile. "Same thing," his mother signed back. "The best love stories require both." They sat in comfortable silence after that, three people connected by love and sign language, and the understanding that family could be built as well as born. That home was something you created with careful attention and open hearts. The summer passed in a blur of moving boxes and negotiations over closet space, and Maisie teaching Lily her elaborate bedtime routine. Lily brought her own rhythms to their household, her love of morning runs, her tendency to leave sketches scattered on every surface, her habit of making elaborate Sunday brunches that turned their kitchen into a gallery of culinary experimentation. She and Maisie developed their own bond, separate from Evan, built on art projects and secret jokes and a shared love of documentaries about prehistoric life. Evan watched his family expand and felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Wholeness. Not the same wholeness he'd had with Jen, that could never be recreated, and he didn't want to recreate it. This was something new, something built from the ashes of grief and the stubborn insistence that love was worth risking everything for. At work, things had settled into a new normal. The scandal of Derek, Marcus, and Joel's terminations had eventually faded into company lore, one of those stories people told new hires about what not to do. Evan had proven himself in his new role, his promotions and successes no longer questioned or attributed to anything other than merit. Catherine had thanked him privately for how he'd handled the situation, for his professionalism and grace under pressure. "You could have made this so much worse," she'd said. "You could have sued, gone to the press, made us all look terrible. Instead, you gave them a choice and gave the company a chance to handle it right. That's leadership, Evan." "It was just kindness," he'd responded. "It wasn't strategy." "The best leadership rarely is," Catherine had replied. On a warm evening in late August, 4 months after that terrible, wonderful first date, Evan came home to find his house transformed. Streamers hung from every doorway, flowers filled every available vase, and in the living room Maisie and Lily had built what could only be described as a blanket fort of epic proportions. "What's all this?" Evan signed, delighted and confused. "It's our family expansion celebration," Maisie explained, popping out of the fort. "Remember? I said we should have one when Lily moved in, but we got busy with the actual moving and forgot. So Lily and I decided to do it tonight." "It's perfect timing," Lily added, emerging from the fort with leaves in her hair and joy on her face. 4 months since we met. 4 months since the worst first date setup became the best thing that ever happened to me. Evan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You two are incredible," he signed. "Both of you. Every day you remind me what love looks like." "Gross," Maisie signed, but she was grinning. "Come on, we made dinner. It's in the fort. We're having a picnic." They ate pasta and garlic bread on a blanket inside the fort, Maisie's fairy lights casting warm shadows on the draped sheets. They told stories and laughed, and Maisie taught Lily the constellations she'd been learning in school, pointing to her glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the fort ceiling. It was ordinary and magical in the way the best moments of family life always are. Nothing extraordinary happening, just love taking up space and making room for itself. After Maisie finally fell asleep in the fort, she'd insisted they camp out overnight. Evan and Lily moved to the porch, curling up on the swing that had been there since Evan bought the house. "I need to tell you something," Lily signed, her expression both nervous and excited. "Okay," Evan signed back, his heart rate picking up. "Derek contacted me," she signed. "Last week. He apologized. A real apology, not a cover-your-ass apology. He explained that he's been in therapy, that he's working on understanding why he felt so threatened by kindness that he tried to weaponize my deafness against you. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, but he wanted me to know that what he did helped him understand he needed to completely change how he saw the world and other people. How did that feel? Evan asked carefully. Strange, Lily admitted. I'm still angry about what he did, about being used that way, but I also think he's genuinely trying to be better. And I realized that holding on to anger was hurting me more than him. So I told him I accepted his apology, and I hoped he continued working on himself, and then I blocked his number because I don't need updates on his journey. Evan laughed, surprised and delighted by her practical approach. That's fair. The thing is, Lily continued, if he hadn't set up that trap, we never would have met. And I can hate what he did while also being grateful for where it led us. Those two things can be true at the same time. They can, Evan agreed, pulling her closer. Life is complicated that way. They sat in silence for a while, rocking gently on the swing, watching the stars emerge as the sun set. Evan thought about how far they'd come in 4 months, how much had changed, how a moment designed to expose his supposed fraudulence had instead revealed the truth about who he was and who he wanted to be, how 3 men's bitterness had accidentally become the catalyst for the family he'd built, for the love he'd found, for the life he was living. I love you, he signed to Lily, the words he'd been feeling for weeks finally given form. Her eyes filled with tears, and she signed back. I love you too, both of you, all of this. I love all of it. Even the dinosaurs? Evan teased. Especially the dinosaurs, Lily signed solemnly. They laughed together, and somewhere inside the house, in a blanket fort illuminated by fairy lights, a little girl slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that her family had grown and her world had expanded, and love was something that multiplied rather than divided. The trap had been sprung, but not the way anyone expected. Kindness hadn't been exposed as a fraud. Instead, it had been revealed as the most powerful force any of them possessed, the ability to choose grace over revenge, forgiveness over bitterness, hope over cynicism. And in the end, that choice had built something beautiful from the rubble of someone else's ugliness. Evan Brooks had been set up to fail. Instead, he'd succeeded in the most important way possible. He'd stayed exactly who he was, and in doing so, had found everything he'd been missing. The autumn arrived with the kind of gentle insistence that made everything feel like a transition, like the world was exhaling after holding its breath through the heat of summer. Leaves turned gold and crimson. The air carried that particular crispness that smelled like possibility. And in the Brooks household, though Lily kept reminding them her last name was Hart, and maybe they should start saying the Brooks Hart household, life had settled into a rhythm that felt both miraculous and inevitable. Maisie was thriving in 3rd grade, bringing home increasingly complex math problems and reading books that made Evan wonder when his daughter had gotten old enough for chapter novels about friendship and loss. She joined an art club at school that met twice a week, and her drawings had evolved from enthusiastic dinosaur sketches to more sophisticated compositions that showed real technical skill. Her teacher had pulled Evan and Lily aside at the first parent-teacher conference to say that Maisie was remarkably empathetic for her age and had become the unofficial welcomer of new students, particularly those who seemed different or struggled to fit in. She told me that everyone deserves to feel like they belong, Mrs. Patterson had explained, her eyes a little misty. When I asked her where she learned that, she said her dad taught her, and Lily showed her what it looks like in practice. Lily had cried in the car afterward, overwhelmed by the idea that she'd become someone Maisie looked up to, someone whose influence shaped how this bright, compassionate child moved through the world. Evan had held her hand across the console and signed with the other. You're not just my partner, you're her parent too, in all the ways that matter. That conversation had opened something between them, a door they'd been circling around but hadn't quite walked through. Because the truth was that Lily had become Maisie's parent in function, if not in name. She packed lunches, attended school events, enforced bedtime routines, helped with homework, administered Band-Aids and comfort after playground falls. She loved Maisie with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd chosen this child, this life, this responsibility, and made it her own. But there was still paperwork to consider, legal definitions to navigate, conversations to have about what their family actually was and what they wanted it to become. They'd been living together for 5 months now, and while everything felt stable and right, Evan found himself thinking more and more about making it official, about transforming their carefully built life into something recognized by law and ceremony and public declaration. He'd started looking at rings in September, browsing jewelry stores during lunch breaks, trying to imagine what Lily would like. She wasn't flashy. She wore minimal jewelry, preferred simple elegance to elaborate statements, but she also had an artist's eye for beauty, for the way light caught in facets, for the craftsmanship that separated mass-produced from meaningful. He wanted something that would make her catch her breath, something that would communicate everything he felt but struggled to put into signs or words. The problem was that Evan Brooks, for all his strategic thinking and careful planning, had no idea how to propose. Should it be public or private? Elaborate or simple? Should he involve Maisie, or was that putting too much pressure on his daughter to perform happiness on demand? He'd managed to make it through 42 years of life, through marriage and loss and single parenthood and career advancement, but somehow planning a proposal had reduced him to the emotional equivalent of a teenage boy trying to ask someone to prom. "You're spiraling," Catherine observed one afternoon when Evan had been staring at the same spreadsheet for 20 minutes without processing any of the data. They were in her office for what was supposed to be a quarterly review, but Catherine had known him long enough to recognize when work wasn't actually what was occupying his mind. "I'm not spiraling," Evan protested. "I'm just thinking." "About?" He hesitated, then figured there was no point in hiding it. Catherine had been his mentor and friend for years, had stood by him through the scandal with Derek and Marcus and Joel, had celebrated when Lily moved in. If anyone would give him honest advice, it was her. "I want to propose to Lily," he said simply. "But I don't know how." Catherine's face broke into a delighted smile. "Evan, that's wonderful. And honestly, it's about time. Everyone in this office has a pool going for when you'd finally ask her." "There's a pool?" "Started by Sarah from HR, who feels partially responsible for your happiness and takes it very seriously," Catherine confirmed. "I picked Thanksgiving weekend, so please don't make me lose $50 by waiting until Christmas." Evan laughed despite himself. "I'll keep your financial interests in mind while planning one of the most important moments of my life." "See that you do," Catherine said with mock seriousness, then softened. "But really, Evan, what are you worried about? You know Lily loves you. You know she's committed to you and Maisie. What's holding you back?" Evan was quiet for a moment, trying to articulate the tangle of feelings. "After Jen died, I never thought I'd do this again. Get married, build a life with someone, risk that kind of loss. I'd made peace with being alone, with focusing everything on Maisie, with the idea that I'd already had my great love story, and it ended. And then Lily walked into my life through the most bizarre, terrible circumstances, and suddenly I have a second chance I never expected." "And that terrifies you," Catherine finished gently. "It does," Evan admitted. "Not because I don't love her or don't want to marry her. I do, more than I can properly express. But asking her to marry me feels like tempting fate, like daring the universe to take her away the way it took Jen. Which is irrational, I know, but grief isn't rational. Fear isn't rational." Catherine leaned back in her chair, studying him with the thoughtful expression she wore when she was choosing her words carefully. "Can I tell you something I learned when my brother died? When something terrible happens, when you lose someone you love, there's this instinct to protect yourself by never risking that pain again. But you can't live that way, Evan. You can't love halfway or hold back pieces of yourself just in case, because the fear of loss will eat you alive faster than any actual loss ever could." "That's reassuring," Evan said dryly. "I'm not done," Catherine continued. "The other thing I learned is that the people we love don't want us to stop living because they're gone. Jen wouldn't want you to be so afraid of losing Lily that you don't fully embrace what you have with her. She'd want you to be happy, to build something beautiful, to show Maisie that love is worth the risk, even when you know it can hurt." Evan felt his throat tighten. "I know you're right, I do, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things." "So feel it emotionally," Catherine suggested. "Sit with the fear, acknowledge it, and then do it anyway. Propose to Lily because you love her, because she's transformed your life, because your daughter calls her mom half the time now, even though she tries to correct herself. Propose because love deserves to be celebrated, not hidden away because you're afraid of what might happen. Evan nodded slowly, letting her words settle into the anxious places in his chest. You're right. You're absolutely right. I usually am, Catherine said with a smile. Now, get out of my office and go buy a ring. And for God's sake, make it happen before Thanksgiving. I could really use $50. 2 weeks later, Evan had a ring, a simple platinum band with a single emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, elegant and understated but catching light like captured fire. The jeweler had shown him dozens of options, but the moment Evan saw this one, he knew. It looked like something Lily would choose for herself, something she'd wear every day without it feeling like a costume or a performance. It was real and beautiful and permanent, like what they'd built together. He hid the ring in his sock drawer, which was probably the first place Lily would look if she went searching, but was the best he could come up with on short notice. Then he started planning the proposal itself, which proved even more complicated than choosing the ring. His first instinct was to do something private, just the two of them, maybe at the restaurant where they'd had that first date. It would be poetic, full circle, a way of reclaiming that space and those memories from the ugliness of how they'd started. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that their story wasn't just about the two of them. It was about Maisie, about the family they'd built, about choosing to let love expand rather than contract. So he called his mother on a Saturday morning while Lily was out for a run and Maisie was still asleep. I need your advice, he signed over video call. His mother, who'd been drinking tea and reading the newspaper in her sunny kitchen, immediately set both aside. This sounds serious. I'm going to propose to Lily, Evan signed and watched his mother's face light up with joy. But I don't know how to do it right. I want it to be special, meaningful, something she'll remember forever. But I also don't want it to be some elaborate production that feels performative. I want it to be us. His mother considered this, her hands moving thoughtfully. What does Lily love? What makes her happiest? Family, Evan signed immediately. Us. Maisie, the life we've built. She's always saying that the best moments are the ordinary ones. Cooking dinner together, helping Maisie with homework, weekend mornings when we all pile into one bed and Maisie reads to us. Then that's your answer, his mother signed. Don't take her somewhere fancy or plan some elaborate surprise. Propose in the middle of your life, in the middle of the ordinary magic you've created together. Show her that you're not asking her to become something different. You're asking her to stay exactly who she is, exactly where she is, forever. It was perfect. It was so obviously perfect that Evan wondered why he'd spent weeks agonizing over venues and timing and elaborate gestures. The answer had been there all along, in the daily rhythms of their life, in the moments that already felt like promises. He decided to do it on the weekend, during their Saturday morning pancake ritual. Maisie would be there, which felt right. This wasn't just about him and Lily becoming partners. It was about formalizing the family they'd already become. He'd make pancakes, probably weird-shaped ones because he'd be nervous. And at some point between the cooking and the eating and the casual chaos of their morning, he'd ask Lily to marry him. The only problem was that Maisie would need to know beforehand, both so she wouldn't accidentally spoil the surprise and because Evan wanted her blessing. So on Friday evening, after Lily had gone to bed early with a headache, Evan sat Maisie down in her room. I need to talk to you about something important, he signed, and Maisie immediately put down the book she'd been reading. Is everything okay? She signed, her face creasing with worry. Everything's great, Evan assured her quickly. Better than great, actually, but I want to ask you something before I do anything else. Maisie waited, her dark eyes so like Jen's, even after all these years, serious and attentive. I want to ask Lily to marry me, Evan signed slowly, tomorrow morning during pancakes. But before I do that, I need to know how you feel about it. Because this isn't just about me and Lily, it's about our family. It's about you. And if you're not ready, or if it feels too fast, or if you have any concerns at all, I need you to tell me. Honestly, I won't be mad, I promise. Maisie was quiet for a long moment, her hand still in her lap, her expression thoughtful in a way that made her seem older than 8 years old. Then she signed, Do you love her? So much, Evan signed,
More than I thought I could love anyone again after your mom died. Does she love you? She does. Does she love me? Maisie asked, and Evan's heart cracked a little at the vulnerability in that question, at the fear that still lived in his daughter despite everything. Maisie, she loves you as much as I do, Evan signed firmly. Maybe even more, because she chose you. She didn't have to be your parent, but she chose it. Every day she chooses you. That's not going to change whether we get married or not. But it might make it more official, Maisie signed. Like she'd legally be my family? Eventually, if you wanted that, we could look into adoption. Evan signed carefully, not wanting to promise anything without talking to Lily first. But you're right that marriage would make our family official in a way it isn't right now. Maisie nodded slowly, processing this. Then she signed, I want you to marry her. I want her to be my mom for real, not just for pretend. And I want to help with the proposal. Evan blinked. You want to help? Yeah, Maisie signed, her face breaking into a grin. I have an idea. It's going to be perfect. She explained her idea, and Evan felt tears prick his eyes, because of course his daughter had figured out exactly the right way to do this. Exactly the gesture that would mean the most to all of them. Sometimes children understood the important things better than adults did, saw straight to the heart of what mattered without getting tangled up in anxiety and logistics. That's beautiful, sweetheart, Evan signed when she finished. Let's do it exactly like that. They spent the next hour planning, working out the details, practicing what they'd say and when. Maisie was so excited she could barely sit still, signing rapid-fire suggestions and questions, her entire body vibrating with the secret they were keeping. When Evan finally tucked her into bed, she hugged him extra tight. I'm glad you found Lily, she signed sleepily, and I'm glad she found us. We're lucky. We are, Evan agreed, kissing her forehead. We're very, very lucky. Saturday morning arrived with October sunshine streaming through the kitchen windows, the kind of perfect autumn day that felt like a gift. Evan was up early, too nervous to sleep, and by the time Lily wandered into the kitchen at 8:30, he already had coffee brewing and ingredients laid out for pancakes. Morning, Lily signed, coming up behind him to wrap her arms around his waist and rest her chin on his shoulder. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, Evan signed back, which wasn't a lie. Thought I'd get started on breakfast. Need help? Actually, Maisie wanted to help today, Evan signed. She has some new pancake ideas she wants to try. On cue, Maisie appeared in the doorway, already dressed and far too alert for a Saturday morning. She was wearing her favorite purple dress, the one she usually saved for special occasions, and carrying something behind her back. Good morning, Maisie signed enthusiastically. Lily, can you sit down? Dad and I are making you special pancakes today. Lily raised an eyebrow at Evan, clearly sensing something was up, but she obediently sat at the kitchen table. Should I be worried about these special pancakes? Definitely not worried, Maisie assured her. Just patient. We're trying something new. Plus, what followed was perhaps the most stressful pancake-making session of Evan's life. He and Maisie worked together at the griddle, using squeeze bottles to create shapes, layering colors, trying to execute Maisie's vision while his hands shook with nerves. Lily watched from the table, sipping coffee and clearly entertained by their intense focus, occasionally signing questions about what they were making that they carefully deflected. Finally, after 20 minutes that felt like hours, they had it. 3 pancakes, each one carefully crafted, each one carrying part of the message they wanted to convey. Evan plated them with Maisie's help, and they brought them to the table together. The first pancake was shaped like a house, with 3 stick figures visible through a window, a tall one, a medium one, and a small one. The second pancake was shaped like a heart. The third pancake had letters carefully piped in darker batter. Marry us? Lily stared at the pancakes for a long moment, her eyes moving from the house, to the heart, to the words, and then up to Evan and Maisie, standing side by side, holding hands, watching her with matching hopeful expressions. We know it's not traditional, Evan signed, his free hand moving while the other stayed clasped with Maisie's. And I have an actual ring, I promise, not just pancakes. But Maisie and I talked, and we realized that the most important thing we wanted to say is that this isn't just me asking you to marry me.
It's both of us asking you to be our family officially, legally, permanently. Maisie stepped forward, finally revealing what she'd been hiding behind her back, a small box that she set in front of Lily. When Lily opened it with shaking hands, she found the emerald ring nestled in velvet, but also something else. A hand-drawn card that Maisie had made, showing the three of them holding hands with the words, "Will you be my mom forever?" written in Maisie's careful handwriting. Lily looked at the card, looked at the ring, looked at the pancakes that were probably getting cold but nobody cared about, and then looked at Evan and Maisie with tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she signed, her hands trembling so much that the word was barely legible. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Maisie launched herself at Lily, hugging her so hard they almost toppled off the chair together, both of them crying and laughing. Evan moved around the table, took the ring from the box with hands that weren't quite steady, and slipped it onto Lily's finger while she held Maisie with her other arm. "Perfect fit," he signed when it slid on smoothly. "Perfect everything," Lily signed back, and then pulled him down into a kiss while Maisie made exaggerated gagging noises that were completely betrayed by the smile on her face. They finally ate the pancakes, which were indeed cold but tasted like joy anyway. Maisie insisted on taking approximately 50 photos of Lily's ring from different angles, already planning how she'd tell her friends at school on Monday. Evan called his mother, who cried happy tears over video chat and demanded they come visit soon so she could celebrate properly. Lily called her own parents, hearing but supportive, who were shocked and delighted and insisted on throwing an engagement party. The news spread through their lives like wildflowers, touching everyone they'd woven into their world. Sarah from HR cried when Evan told her at work on Monday, claiming partial credit for the whole relationship and demanding to be invited to the wedding. Catherine handed Evan $50 with a grin, having won the office pool after all. Lily's deaf community friends threw them a celebration at their weekly gathering, the conversation flowing in rapid ASL as people toasted their happiness and shared stories of their own relationships. And in a development that surprised Evan more than anything else, he received a card in the mail 2 weeks after the proposal. It was from Marcus, and inside was a simple message. "I heard through the grapevine about your engagement. I'm genuinely happy for you. Thank you for showing me what it looks like to build something beautiful instead of tearing things down. Congratulations." Evan showed the card to Lily that evening, and she read it thoughtfully before signing, "Do you think he means it?" "I think he's trying to," Evan signed back, "and that's enough." They started planning the wedding with the same approach they'd taken to everything else, focusing on what mattered to them rather than what traditions dictated they should do. They wanted something small and intimate, just family and close friends, held somewhere that felt like them. After considering various venues, they realized the most meaningful location was Evan's backyard, the space where they'd had that first family dinner, where Maisie had taught Lily about constellations in the blanket fort, where so many ordinary magical moments had unfolded. They set the date for the following spring, giving themselves time to plan, but not so much time that the anticipation became anxiety. Maisie appointed herself the unofficial wedding coordinator, filling notebooks with ideas for decorations and color schemes, and whether they should have a dinosaur cake or a traditional one. Lily gently steered her toward compromise options, and they eventually landed on a plan that was equal parts elegant and whimsical, sophisticated and playful, just like their family. The winter months passed in a blur of preparations and normal life intertwining. Evan continued to thrive at work, leading his team through a major campaign redesign that earned the company several new clients. Lily's business was growing too. Her accessibility consulting work had attracted attention from major tech companies, and she was considering hiring additional designers to keep up with demand. Maisie finished 3rd grade with straight A's and an art portfolio that her teacher predicted would earn her scholarship someday. They celebrated Christmas with Evan's mother, who spent a week at their house and delighted in watching her son so visibly happy, so completely at peace with where his life had led him. They rang in the New Year as a family, Maisie staying up until midnight for the first time and falling asleep 10 minutes later on the couch between them. They navigated the normal challenges of any blended family: disagreements about parenting approaches, negotiations over household responsibilities, moments of frustration when communication broke down or schedules collided. But through it all, they kept coming back to the same foundation: love, patience, and the willingness to choose each other every single day. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. On a Tuesday evening in March, with the wedding just 2 months away, Lily came home from work with news that made her hands shake as she signed it. She'd been offered a major contract with a Silicon Valley company, a year-long project that would require significant travel and time commitment, but would essentially establish her as one of the top accessibility consultants in the country. It was the kind of opportunity that could transform her career, open doors she'd spent years trying to break down, give her the financial independence and professional recognition she'd worked so hard to achieve. It was also the kind of opportunity that would mean less time with Maisie, more stress on Evan, a disruption to the carefully balanced life they'd built. "I don't know what to do," Lily signed, sitting at the kitchen table with the contract in front of her. "Part of me wants to say yes immediately, but part of me is terrified that choosing my career means choosing it over our family, over being present for Maisie, over being the partner you need." Evan sat down across from her, took her hands in his, and signed carefully. "You're not choosing your career over our family. You're showing our daughter that women can be ambitious and successful and still be present for the people they love. You're modeling that partnership means supporting each other's dreams, not sacrificing them." "But what if I can't balance it all?" Lily signed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "What if I take this job and I'm traveling constantly and I miss Maisie's school events and you resent me for not being here?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Evan signed firmly. "We'll adjust schedules, we'll communicate, we'll ask for help when we need it. But Lily, you need to take this job, not because of the money or the prestige, but because you've earned it, and you'll regret it forever if you don't. And I would never want you to look back in 10 years and wonder what you could have accomplished if you'd just been brave enough to try." Lily was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "We found each other," Evan corrected, "through the most ridiculous circumstances imaginable. And we've built something strong enough to weather anything, including you becoming wildly successful and in demand. Take the job, Lily. We'll make it work." She signed the contract the next day, and they spent the following weeks reorganizing their lives to accommodate the new reality. Evan adjusted his work schedule to be home more in the evenings. Maisie started attending an after-school program 2 days a week that she actually loved, and they found a regular babysitter for the times when both Evan and Lily had evening commitments. It wasn't seamless, and there were definitely moments of stress and frustration, but they managed. They communicated, they compromised, they celebrated small victories and learned from small failures. And through it all, the wedding planning continued, a bright spot on the horizon that reminded them what all of this was for. Not just the logistics of merging schedules and managing careers, but the deeper project of building a life together that honored all of their dreams and needs and hopes. 2 weeks before the wedding, Lily had a final meeting with her lawyer about something she'd been working on quietly for months. When she came home that evening, she found Evan and Maisie in the living room working on wedding favors, small potted succulents that guests would take home, each one with a tag that Maisie had hand-lettered. "Can I talk to you both?" Lily signed, her expression serious but not sad. They set aside the favors and gave her their full attention. Lily pulled out a folder from her bag, held it for a moment like it contained something precious and fragile, and then signed, "I want to adopt Maisie. Legally, officially. I want to be her mother not just in practice but on paper, in the eyes of the law, permanently. But only if that's something you both want." She looked at Maisie directly. "I know you have a mom who loved you, who will always be your mom even though she's not here. I'm not trying to replace her or erase her, but I love you as much as any mother could love a child, and I want to make that official, if you're comfortable with it." Maisie stared at the folder, then at Lily, then at Evan. Her face cycled through several emotions before landing on something that looked like hope, mixed with fear, mixed with overwhelming love. "Would I have 2 moms then?" she signed slowly. "One who's in heaven and one who's here." "Yes," Lily confirmed. "Exactly that." "And you'd be my mom at school and at the doctor and everywhere?" "Everywhere," Lily signed. "I already feel like your mom. This would just make it legal." Maisie turned to Evan. "What do you think, Dad?" Evan was trying very hard not to cry and failing spectacularly. "I think," he signed with hands that shook slightly,
that we would be incredibly lucky to make Lily your legal mother. But it's your choice, sweetheart. Your feelings matter most here. Maisie was quiet for a long moment, her small face serious with the weight of the decision. Then she stood up, walked over to Lily, and climbed into her lap in the way she'd been doing since she was small enough that it was easy, and still did now, even though she was getting too big for it. "I want you to be my mom," she signed against Lily's chest. "For real. Forever." Lily wrapped her arms around Maisie and held her close, her face buried in Maisie's hair, her shoulders shaking with sobs she was trying to keep quiet. Evan moved to join them, wrapping both of them in his arms, and they stayed that way for a long time. A family that had been built piece by piece, choice by choice, choosing each other over and over again until those choices became permanent, unshakable, real. They started the adoption paperwork the next week, knowing it would take months to finalize but wanting to begin the process before the wedding. The lawyer explained that it would be easier once Lily and Evan were married, that the courts looked favorably on step-parent adoptions in stable family situations, that barring any complications, it should be straightforward. "Your family is beautiful," the lawyer told them at the end of the consultation, watching Maisie show Lily a drawing she'd made while they handled paperwork. "I've been doing family law for 20 years, and I can always tell which families are going to make it. Yours will." 2 days before the wedding, Evan found himself at the Martinez Grill for the first time since that fateful Friday night nearly a year ago. He'd made a reservation for himself, needing a moment alone to process everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen, the enormity of how much his life had transformed since the last time he'd sat at table 12. The hostess led him to a different table this time. Table 12 was occupied by a young couple who looked to be on their own first date, both of them nervous and hopeful and completely unaware they were sitting at the site of someone else's origin story. Evan watched them for a moment, wondering if they'd make it, if this awkward evening would transform into something lasting, or if they'd part ways and become nothing but a story about that one date that didn't work out. He ordered the chicken marsala, the same thing he'd ordered that night, and as he waited for his food, he thought about Derek and Marcus and Joel. He wondered where they were now, what they were doing, whether they'd managed to become better people or if bitterness had calcified into their permanent state. He hoped they were okay. He hoped they'd learned something. He hoped they'd found whatever it was they needed to find peace with themselves. But mostly, he hoped they understood that what they'd tried to destroy had only grown stronger because of their attempt. That kindness really was its own reward, that integrity really did matter more than appearances, that choosing love over fear really did lead somewhere beautiful. His food arrived, and Evan ate slowly, savoring both the meal and the moment. Tomorrow, he and Lily would have their rehearsal dinner. The day after that, they'd stand in their backyard surrounded by the people they loved most and make promises to each other that they'd already been keeping for almost a year. Maisie would stand with them, part of the ceremony rather than just a witness to it, because this marriage wasn't just about two adults committing to each other. It was about a family choosing to become official, choosing to put words and signatures and legal recognition to what their hearts had already decided months ago. Evan paid his bill, left a generous tip, and walked out of the Martinez Grill into the spring evening. The air smelled like jasmine and possibility, and somewhere across the city, in the home they'd made together, Lily and Maisie were probably arguing about whether dinosaurs or flowers were more appropriate for wedding decorations, both of them laughing, both of them his. They'd set him up as a joke, those three bitter men who couldn't believe kindness was real. They tried to expose him as a fraud, to prove his heart was as carefully constructed as a marketing campaign, to reveal that nobody could actually be as decent as Evan Brooks appeared to be. Instead, they'd exposed themselves. And in doing so, they'd accidentally given Evan the greatest gift imaginable, a second chance at love, a partner who saw him completely and chose him anyway, a family that grew larger and stronger precisely because he'd refused to let cruelty change who he was. The trap had failed. Love had won. And in 2 days, Evan Brooks would stand in his backyard and promise forever to the woman who'd walked into that trap beside him, who'd stayed when she could have left, who'd chosen grace and hope and stubborn optimism even when the world gave her every reason to choose otherwise. It was, Evan thought as he drove home through the twilight, the most beautiful revenge imaginable. Living well, loving deeply, and proving every single day that kindness wasn't a performance.
It was just who he was. And it was more than enough. The morning of the wedding arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that made people believe in signs from the universe. The sky was cloudless and brilliant, the temperature hovering in that sweet spot between warm and hot, and Evan's backyard, transformed over the past week by a small army of family and friends, looked like something out of a fairy tale that had been filtered through Maisie's artistic sensibilities. White chairs sat in neat rows facing a simple arch that Lily's deaf community friends had helped construct and decorate with flowers and flowing fabric. But woven throughout the traditional wedding elements were touches that were pure Maisie. Small dinosaur figurines hidden among the floral arrangements, constellation maps printed on the programs, centerpieces that combined elegant roses with succulents and geodes. It was sophisticated and whimsical, grown-up and childlike, a perfect representation of the family that was about to make itself official. Evan stood in his bedroom at 7 in the morning, already showered and dressed in his suit pants and undershirt, too nervous to finish getting ready, but too awake to go back to bed. The wedding wasn't until 2 in the afternoon, which meant he had 7 hours to survive before he could actually marry Lily. 7 hours felt like an eternity. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, who'd arrived 2 days ago and was staying at a hotel downtown with his brother's family. "How are you holding up? Do you need me to come over early?" Evan smiled and typed back, "I'm fine. Nervous, but good nervous. See you at noon for photos." Another text came through, this one from Catherine. "Congratulations, Evan. You deserve every bit of happiness coming your way today. The office pool has now shifted to how long until baby announcements. I've got 18 months. Don't let me down." He laughed out loud at that, the sound echoing in his empty bedroom. The idea of more children hadn't really been discussed yet. Maisie was 8 now, and adding an infant to their carefully balanced life seemed both terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. But it was something to think about later, after today, after the adoption was finalized, after they'd settled into being officially married for a while. Footsteps in the hallway made Evan look up, and Maisie appeared in his doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair a tangled mess around her face, clutching her stuffed triceratops. "Can't sleep?" Evan signed. "Too excited," Maisie confirmed, climbing onto his bed and settling against the pillows. "Is Lily awake?" "Probably. She texted me at 6 to say she couldn't sleep either." Lily had spent the night at a hotel with her parents and her sister, honoring the tradition of not seeing each other before the ceremony, even though they'd both agreed it was silly. But Maisie had insisted that some traditions were important, and who were they to argue with an 8-year-old who'd been planning this wedding in her head for months? "Dad," Maisie signed, her expression turning serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you scared?" Evan considered the question carefully, wanting to give his daughter an honest answer. "A little," he admitted. "Not about marrying Lily, I'm completely sure about that. But getting married again after Mom died, it brings up a lot of feelings. Happiness and sadness mixed together. Does that make sense?" Maisie nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately, trying to remember her, but it's getting harder. Some things are fuzzy now, like I know they happened, but I can't really see them anymore." Evan's heart cracked open. "Come here, sweetheart." Maisie crawled across the bed and into his arms, and Evan held her close, breathing in the little girl's smell of her shampoo and the slight mustiness of the stuffed dinosaur she still slept with every night. "It's okay to forget some things," Evan signed when she pulled back enough to see his hands. "You were so young when Mom died. But you know what doesn't fade? The love. The way she felt about you, the way you felt about her. That's not a memory that can get fuzzy. That's part of who you are." "But what if Lily replaces Mom?" Maisie signed, the fear finally voiced. "What if I love Lily so much that I forget Mom was my first mom?" "That's not how love works," Evan signed gently. "Love doesn't replace other love. It just adds to it. You can love Lily completely and still love Mom completely. They're both your mothers, just in different ways. One you remember in your heart and your mind, and one you experience every single day. Both are real. Both matter." "A promise?" "I promise," Evan signed firmly. "And you know what I think? I think Mom would be so happy that you have Lily, that you have someone who loves you this much, who chose to be your parent, who shows up for you every single day.
I think she'd be grateful. Maisie considered this, her face working through emotions too complex for her age, but necessary to process anyway. I wish she could be here today, she finally signed. Not instead of Lily, just also. Me too, baby. Me too. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, Evan's arms around his daughter, both of them thinking about the woman who'd started this family and the woman who was expanding it, about loss and love, and the complicated beauty of life moving forward, even when part of you wanted to stay frozen in grief forever. I'm going to tell Lily about this, Maisie finally signed. About Mom and how I'm feeling. Is that okay? It's more than okay, Evan assured her. Lily would want to know. She never wants you to feel like you have to hide your feelings about Mom to protect her feelings. She's really good at that, Maisie signed thoughtfully. Being okay with me loving Mom. Some of my friends at school whose parents are divorced say their step-parents get jealous, but Lily never does. That's because Lily is secure enough in her own place in our family that she doesn't feel threatened by Mom's place, Evan explained. That's what real love looks like, making space for all the feelings, even the complicated ones. Maisie nodded, then brightened. Can we make pancakes? I'm hungry, and we have 7 hours to kill. They made pancakes together, father and daughter moving around the kitchen in the synchronized way that came from years of Saturday morning routines. Evan made dinosaur-shaped ones without even thinking about it, no longer nervous enough to default to perfect circles. Maisie chattered about the wedding, who was sitting where, what her dress looked like, whether the photographer would capture her reading the poem she'd written for the ceremony. At 9:30, Lily's sister Julia arrived with Maisie's flower girl dress and strict instructions from Lily about hair and makeup timing. Julia was hearing but had learned sign language over the past year, determined to communicate with her future sister-in-law properly, and she greeted Evan and Maisie with enthusiastic hugs. Lily is a nervous wreck, Julia announced, signing as she spoke. She's gone through 3 different lipstick colors and keeps asking if the dress makes her look weird. I told her she looks gorgeous, but you know how brides get. Is she okay? Evan asked, concern flickering through him. She's perfect, Julia assured him. Just normal wedding jitters. She's so excited to marry you that she's practically vibrating. Mom had to physically stop her from calling you 6 times this morning. Evan smiled, the tightness in his chest easing. Tell her I love her, and that I can't wait to see her. I will. Now, I'm stealing Maisie for hair and makeup. We'll be back at 11:30 for pictures. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation and coordination. The photographer arrived and captured Evan putting on his jacket, adjusting his tie, checking his reflection with an expression that suggested he couldn't quite believe this day was actually happening. His mother and brother arrived with their families, and his mother cried the moment she saw him fully dressed, signing that he looked just like his father had on his wedding day. Friends from work began arriving, Catherine and Sarah and several others from the office who'd watched Evan's love story unfold and wanted to witness this final chapter. Members of Lily's deaf community filled in, their conversations in ASL creating a visual symphony of moving hands and expressive faces. Lily's parents arrived with relatives Evan had only met a handful of times, all of them warm and welcoming and clearly delighted that Lily had found such happiness. At 1:30, with 30 minutes until the ceremony was scheduled to begin, Evan stood at the front of his backyard next to the officiant, a friend of Lily's who was certified to perform weddings and fluent in ASL, and watched his guests take their seats. The string quartet they'd hired began playing softly, and Evan felt his heart start to race in earnest. This was happening. This was really happening. Maisie appeared at his side, looking impossibly grown up in her sage green dress, her hair twisted into an elegant updo that somehow still had a small dinosaur clip hidden in it. She was carrying a basket of flower petals that she'd insisted on making herself, each one hand-painted with tiny constellations. "You ready, Dad?" she signed. "I don't know," Evan admitted. "Are you?" "I've been ready since the pancake proposal," Maisie signed with a grin. "Now you just have to catch up." The music shifted and everyone stood. Evan's breath caught in his throat as Lily appeared at the far end of the aisle on her father's arm. She was devastating. There was no other word for it. Her dress was simple and elegant, ivory silk that draped beautifully,
cap sleeves, a neckline that was modest but showed the graceful line of her neck and shoulders. Her hair was down in loose waves, a few small flowers woven into it. She carried a bouquet of white roses and greenery, but what caught Evan's attention most was her face, radiant with joy, eyes locked on his, smile so wide it looked like it might split her face in two. She was the most beautiful thing Evan had ever seen, and she was about to become his wife. Maisie walked down the aisle first, scattering her constellation petals with careful precision, signing "excuse me" to guests as she passed and making everyone smile. When she reached the front, she took her place next to Evan, slipping her hand into his and squeezing tight. Then Lily and her father began their walk. Evan watched every step, memorizing the way the sunlight caught in her hair, the way her dress moved, the way she bit her lips slightly like she always did when she was trying not to cry. Her father, a quiet man who'd initially struggled with his daughter's deafness but had spent years becoming the parent she deserved, had tears streaming down his face as he walked her toward her future. When they reached the front, Lily's father shook Evan's hand, then signed to his daughter, "Be happy, sweetheart. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Lily kissed his cheek, signed, "I love you, Dad," and then turned to face Evan fully. For a moment, they just looked at each other, both of them grinning like idiots, both of them crying, both of them completely overwhelmed by the enormity of the moment. The officiant had to clear her throat twice to get their attention. "We are gathered here today," she began, signing and speaking simultaneously so that all guests could follow, "to witness the union of Evan Brooks and Lily Hart, and to celebrate the family they've already built and the family they're choosing to formalize today." The ceremony was a blend of traditional and personal. They'd written their own vows, but before they got to those, Maisie had asked to speak. The officiant nodded to her, and Maisie stepped forward, pulling a folded piece of paper from some hidden pocket in her dress. "I wrote a poem," Maisie signed, her voice clear as she spoke for the hearing guests while her hands moved for Lily. "It's called Two Moms." She unfolded the paper and began to read. "I had a mom who held me first, who sang me songs I couldn't hear, whose love was planted like a seed that grows inside me still. I have a mom who holds me now, who signs me stories every night, whose love is water and sunlight that helps me bloom and grow. Both are real. Both are mine. Both are mothers. Both are love. And today we make it official that family isn't just who you start with, but who you choose to keep, who chooses you right back, who shows up and stays and loves you even when, especially when, it's hard. So Lily, thank you for choosing us. Thank you for being my mom. And Dad, thank you for being brave enough to love again, to let us be a bigger family, to show me that hearts don't break forever. They heal and grow and make room for more." By the time Maisie finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. Lily was openly sobbing, Evan was clutching Maisie's hand like a lifeline, and half the guests were searching for tissues. Even the photographer was wiping her eyes while still managing to capture every moment. Maisie folded her poem carefully and handed it to Lily, who tucked it into her bouquet like the treasure it was. Then Maisie stepped back to her spot, and the officiant gave everyone a moment to compose themselves before continuing. "Evan and Lily have prepared their own vows," she signed. "Evan, whenever you're ready." Evan took both of Lily's hands in his, took a deep breath, and began to sign. "Lily, a year ago, I sat in a restaurant convinced I was about to have a terrible date. I thought someone was trying to humiliate me, to prove I wasn't who I claimed to be. What I didn't know was that they were actually giving me the greatest gift imaginable. They were bringing me you. You walked into that trap with grace and courage. You stayed when you could have left. You chose to see who I really was instead of letting other people's ugliness define the moment. And every day since then, you've continued choosing us, choosing me, choosing Maisie, choosing this messy, complicated, beautiful life we're building together. You've made me believe in second chances. You've shown Maisie what it looks like when someone loves you, not because they have to, but because they genuinely want to. You've made our house a home in ways I didn't even realize it was missing. So I promise you this, I will choose you every day for the rest of my life. I will support your dreams even when they're scary. I will communicate even when it's hard. I will remember that we're a team, that we face everything together. I will love you in the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones. I will be the partner you deserve, the father Maisie deserves, the man I want to be because of you. I will love you until my last breath, and if there's anything after that, I'll love you there too.
Lily was crying so hard she could barely see to sign her own vows, but she managed, "Evan, when people ask me how we met, I never know what to say. The truth is too strange, too complicated, too wrapped up in other people's cruelty. But here's what I've realized. It doesn't matter how we started. What matters is what we built. You saw me as a person, not a disability. You communicated with me in my own language from the very first moment. You made space for me in your life and Maisie's life without ever making me feel like I was intruding. You let me be scared and vulnerable and uncertain, and you loved me through all of it. You've given me a family I never thought I'd have, a daughter I didn't give birth to but love like I did, a home where I can be completely myself. So I promise you this, I will love Maisie as fiercely as you do. I will honor Jen's memory and never try to erase her place in your family. I will build my career and chase my dreams, but never at the expense of what we've created together. I will sign you love notes and leave them around the house. I will make terrible jokes to make you laugh. I will hold your hand through the scary parts and celebrate with you during the joyful ones. I will be your partner, your best friend, your home. I will love you and Maisie with everything I have, for as long as I live." The officiant had to take a moment to compose herself before continuing. "The rings, please." Maisie produced 2 simple platinum bands from another hidden pocket, handing them to the officiant with a proud smile. These rings would join the emerald engagement ring already on Lily's finger, symbols of promises made and kept. "Evan, place this ring on Lily's finger and repeat after me. With this ring, I thee wed." Evan slid the ring onto Lily's finger, his hand steady despite the tears on his face, and signed, "With this ring, I thee wed." "Lily, place this ring on Evan's finger and repeat, 'With this ring, I thee wed.'" Lily's hands shook slightly as she slid the ring onto Evan's finger, but her signs were clear. "With this ring, I thee wed." "By the power vested in me by the state," the officiant signed with a huge smile, "I now pronounce you married. You may kiss." Evan pulled Lily close and kissed her as their guests erupted in applause and cheers, some vocal and some signed, hands waving in the air in the deaf community's version of clapping. Maisie launched herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around their legs, and they broke apart laughing to include her in their embrace. "We did it," Lily signed over Maisie's head. "We did," Evan confirmed. "Can we eat cake now?" Maisie asked, and everyone nearby who could see her signs burst out laughing. The reception was exactly what they'd hoped for, intimate and joyful, full of good food and better company. Dinner was served family-style at long tables in the backyard, the menu carefully chosen to include dishes that accommodated various dietary restrictions and preferences. Toasts were given in both spoken English and ASL, with interpreters on hand to ensure everyone could follow along. Evan's mother spoke about watching her son navigate grief and single parenthood with grace, about how proud she was that he'd been brave enough to open his heart again. Lily's father talked about his daughter's strength and resilience, about how she'd taught him to see the world differently. Catherine gave a speech that was equal parts heartfelt and hilarious, including the detail about the office betting pool that made everyone laugh. Sarah from HR cried through her entire toast about being a matchmaker, even accidentally, and how sometimes the best love stories came from the worst circumstances. But the toast that stuck with everyone was Julia's. Lily's sister stood up with a glass of champagne and signed as she spoke. "I've watched my sister navigate a world that wasn't built for her since the day she was born. I've watched her fight for accommodations, for recognition, for basic human dignity. I've watched her be treated as lesser than, as damaged, as someone to be pitied or fixed or ignored. And I've watched her refuse to shrink, refuse to apologize for taking up space, refuse to let other people's limitations become her own." When Lily told me about her first date with Evan, about how it was supposed to be a trap but turned into something real, I thought, of course. Of course my sister would take someone's cruelty and transform it into love. Because that's who she is. She finds light in dark places. She builds beauty from broken things. She loves fully and without reservation, even though the world has given her plenty of reasons not to. Evan, you are so incredibly lucky to have her. Maisie, you are blessed beyond measure to have her as your mother. And Lily, my beautiful sister, you are finally with people who see you completely and love you entirely. To the Brooks Hart family, may your love continue to prove that kindness wins, that hope matters, and that family is what you make it. The clinking of glasses and waving of hands filled the backyard as guests toasted the new family. Evan caught Lily's eye across the table and signed, "I love you." "I love you more," she signed back. "I love you both the most," Maisie interjected, making them laugh. The cake, a compromise between Maisie's dinosaur dreams and adult elegance, was 3 tiers of vanilla and chocolate with buttercream frosting, decorated with delicate sugar flowers and small fondant dinosaurs hidden on the backside where they weren't immediately visible but could be discovered by curious 8-year-olds. Cutting it together, all 3 of them guiding the knife, felt like the perfect metaphor for their family. Working together, making room for everyone's preferences, creating something that honored both the grown-up and the whimsical. As the evening drew on and the sun began to set, string lights twinkled to life throughout the backyard. Someone started music playing, a carefully curated playlist that included songs with strong bass lines so deaf guests could feel the rhythm, and people began to dance. Evan and Lily had their first dance as a married couple to a song that meant something to both of them, swaying together while Evan signed the lyrics so Lily could follow along. Then Maisie cut in, insisting on a dance with both of her parents, and they lifted her between them and spun in circles until all 3 of them were dizzy and laughing. Other guests joined in, the dance floor filling with movement and joy, and Evan looked around at the celebration happening in his backyard, at his mother dancing with his brother, at Lily's parents talking animatedly with Catherine, at Sarah and Julia teaching some of the hearing guests basic signs, at Maisie showing her friends from school the hidden dinosaurs on the cake, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. This life, this family, this impossible, improbable, beautiful reality that had grown from the seeds of someone else's bitterness. He'd been set up to fail, and instead he'd found everything he'd been missing without even knowing he was missing it. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, each one stopping to hug the new family and share their joy, Evan noticed someone standing at the edge of the property, half hidden by the shadows. His heart jumped with irrational fear, some part of him expecting Derek or Marcus or Joel to appear, to ruin this perfect day with their presence, or their bitterness, or their inability to let go. But it wasn't any of them. It was just a neighbor, an older woman who lived 3 houses down, who'd watched the celebration from her porch and had walked over to offer her congratulations. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, signing along with her words. Apparently she was deaf too, which Evan had never known in the 5 years he'd lived here. "But I wanted to tell you that I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years, and I've never seen a wedding as beautiful as this one. Not because of the decorations or the food, though those were lovely, but because of the love. It's rare to see people who genuinely like each other as much as they love each other. You 3 have that. Hold on to it." "Thank you," Evan signed, touched by her words. "Would you like some cake? We have plenty left." She smiled. "I would love some cake." They invited her to join the remaining guests, and she spent the next hour telling stories about the neighborhood's history, making everyone laugh with her observations about the various families who'd come and gone over the decades. When she finally left, Maisie turned to Evan and signed, "I didn't know Mrs. Chen was deaf." "Neither did I," Evan admitted. "Goes to show you never really know everything about your neighbors." By 10 o'clock, only immediate family remained. Lily's parents were staying at the hotel with Julia, and they said their goodbyes with promises to come back for brunch before they flew home the next day. Evan's mother hugged all 3 of them, signing to Lily, "Welcome to the family, daughter. Take care of my son." "Always," Lily promised. When everyone had finally gone, and the backyard was quiet except for the soft sound of music still playing through the speakers, Evan, Lily, and Maisie collapsed onto the grass, looking up at the stars that were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "Best day ever," Maisie signed sleepily. "Best day ever," Lily agreed. Evan didn't sign anything, just reached out to hold both their hands, forming a chain connecting all 3 of them. They lay there for a long time, tired and happy and complete, watching the sky transform from twilight blue to deep indigo scattered with stars. "We should probably go inside," Lily finally signed.
Maisie needs to sleep and we have cleanup tomorrow. 5 more minutes, Maisie pleaded. 5 more minutes, Evan agreed. Those 5 minutes stretched to 15 and then to 20, none of them quite ready to end the day, to move from this perfect moment into whatever came next. But eventually Maisie's eyes started to close, and Evan scooped her up and carried her inside, Lily following with her shoes in her hand. They tucked Maisie into bed still in her flower girl dress because she was already asleep, and they didn't want to wake her. Evan kissed her forehead. Lily did the same, and they stood in her doorway for a moment watching her sleep, this child who'd lost so much and gained so much, who'd been brave enough to let new people in, who'd helped build this family with her open heart and generous spirit. She's amazing, Lily sighed quietly. She is, Evan agreed, and so are you. They made their way to their own bedroom, their bedroom now, officially, legally, in every way that mattered. Lily sat on the edge of the bed and began removing the flowers from her hair one by one, placing them carefully on the nightstand like they were precious artifacts rather than grocery store blooms. What are you thinking? Evan sighed, sitting down next to her. That a year ago I was so lonely, Lily sighed slowly. I had friends and family and a career I loved, but I was lonely in that particular way that comes from not having a partner, not having someone to share the small moments with. I'd convinced myself I was okay with it, that maybe romantic love just wasn't in the cards for me, that I could have a full life without it. And now? Evan prompted. Now I know that I was lying to myself, Lily sighed with a small smile. I wasn't okay with it. I was just trying to protect myself from disappointment, and if I'd kept protecting myself, if I'd canceled that date or walked away when I learned it was a trap, I would have missed this, all of this. You and Maisie, and this ridiculous perfect family we've built. I'm glad you stayed, Evan sighed simply. Me too. Lily turned to face him fully. Evan, can I tell you something? Always. When Derek emailed me that apology last month, he said something that stuck with me. He said that watching us through that camera, watching how genuinely kind you were, had broken something in him. Not in a bad way, but in a necessary way. It had shattered his cynicism so completely that he had to rebuild his entire worldview from scratch, and he said he hoped that maybe someday he could be half as decent as you are. Evan felt his throat tighten. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it, Lily sighed. I'm just telling you because I want you to understand the impact you have, not just on me and Maisie, but on everyone around you. Your kindness isn't just some personality trait. It's a force that changes people, that makes them want to be better than they are. That's rare, Evan. That's special. And I'm so grateful I get to spend the rest of my life learning from it. You make me sound like a saint, Evan protested. I'm just a person trying to do right by the people I love. Exactly, Lily sighed. That's what makes it remarkable. You don't do it for recognition or reward. You just do it because it's who you are. They got ready for bed in comfortable silence, moving around each other with the ease of people who'd already been sharing space for months. When they finally slipped under the covers, Lily curled into Evan's side, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. Mrs. Brooks' heart, Evan murmured against her hair, knowing she couldn't hear him but needing to say it anyway. She pulled back slightly and signed. What did you say? Mrs. Brooks' heart? Evan repeated, this time in sign language. That's you now. Actually, I'm keeping my name professionally, Lily signed with a grin. But personally, yes. I'm yours. We're each other's. Forever. Forever, Evan confirmed. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, exhausted from the day, but more content than either of them had been in years. Outside, the backyard was quiet except for the soft rustle of wind through the trees and the distant sound of traffic. Inside, a family slept. A family that had been built from the broken pieces of loss and loneliness, from the ashes of cruelty and cynicism, from the stubborn insistence that love was worth believing in, even when the world suggested otherwise. 6 months later, in the middle of a random Tuesday afternoon, Evan got a call at work that made his hands shake so badly he nearly dropped his phone. The adoption had been finalized. As of that moment, legally and officially, Lily Hart Brooks was Maisie's mother. He left work immediately, something he never did, and drove to Maisie's school. He signed her out early, citing a family emergency, which wasn't exactly a lie, because this felt emergent in the best possible way. Maisie was confused but excited to leave school early, and she chattered about her day as Evan drove to Lily's office. Lily was in a meeting when they arrived, but her assistant, who'd been sworn to secrecy about why Evan might be showing up unexpectedly, interrupted to tell her she had visitors. When Lily came out and saw Evan and Maisie standing in her lobby, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery, she knew immediately what had happened. "It's final?" she signed, her hands shaking. "It's final," Evan confirmed. "You're officially Maisie's mom." Lily sank into a chair, overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face. Maisie crawled into her lap, too big for this really, but doing it anyway, and hugged her fiercely. "I have two moms now," Maisie signed against Lily's shoulder. "One in heaven and one right here. I'm the luckiest kid in the world." They celebrated that night with Maisie's favorite dinner, homemade pizza and ice cream sundaes, and Lily officially added Maisie to her insurance, updated her emergency contacts at school, completed all the bureaucratic steps that transformed love into legal reality. It was mundane and monumental at the same time, the way the most important moments often were. Life continued its ordinary magic. Evan thrived at work, earning another promotion and a significant raise that allowed them to start saving for Maisie's college fund and take a family vacation to see Evan's mother and the coast where he'd grown up. Lily's business exploded with success, her contracts with major tech companies establishing her as one of the leading accessibility consultants in the country. She hired 2 additional designers and started teaching workshops on inclusive design, finding deep satisfaction in transforming her personal experience into systemic change. Maisie finished 4th grade at the top of her class, won a regional art competition with a piece about families that featured 3 figures signing to each other, and started asking questions about middle school and whether she could take ASL as her foreign language elective, even though she already spoke it fluently. She'd grown tall and confident, still obsessed with dinosaurs, but also developing interests in marine biology and creative writing, and about a dozen other things that changed monthly. The house they'd bought together 2 years after the wedding, needing more space as all of them expanded into their lives, was filled with the comfortable chaos of a family actively living. Lily's sketches covered the refrigerator alongside Maisie's drawings. Evan's work papers competed for space on the kitchen counter with Maisie's homework and Lily's design samples. The walls were covered with photos documenting their journey, the 3 of them at the beach, at Maisie's school events, at Evan's company parties, at Lily's deaf community gatherings, on random Tuesday evenings when someone had captured them, laughing about something only they found funny. And on a shelf in the living room, carefully preserved in a frame, was the pancake proposal photo, slightly blurry because Evan had been shaking when he took it, showing 3 pancakes on a plate that spelled out the question that had changed everything. Marry us? One evening in late fall, almost 3 years after that disastrous turned beautiful first date, Evan and Lily sat on their back porch watching Maisie play with the neighbor kids in the fading light. The air had that particular autumn chill that made you want to sit close to someone you loved, and they were wrapped in a blanket together, coffee cups warming their hands. "Do you ever think about that night?" Lily signed, setting her cup down to free her hands. "The restaurant, the camera, Derek and his friends." "Sometimes," Evan admitted. "Usually when something really good happens, and I think about how close I came to missing all of this. If I'd confronted them about the camera and canceled the date, if you decided not to show up, if either of us had let their cruelty poison what we could have built." "I think about Derek's apology sometimes," Lily signed, "about how he said watching us broke his cynicism. I wonder if he's actually different now, or if that was just guilt talking." "Does it matter?" Evan asked. Lily considered this. "I guess not. What matters is that we didn't let them break us. We took their worst intentions and transformed them into something beautiful. That's the real revenge. Not destroying them back, but living so well that their attempted destruction becomes irrelevant." "Living well is the best revenge," Evan quoted with a smile. "Living well is the only revenge," Lily corrected. "Everything else is just bitterness dressed up as justice." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Maisie laugh with her friends, watching the sky turn from blue to purple to indigo. This was the life they'd built. Not perfect, never perfect,
but real and warm and full of love that expanded rather than contracted, that made room for complexity and grief and joy all mixed together. "I'm happy," Lily signed eventually. "Genuinely, completely happy. I didn't think I'd ever be able to say that without qualification or caveat, but I can say it now. I'm happy." "So am I," Evan signed back. "So am I." Maisie came running up to the porch then, out of breath and grinning. "Mom, Dad, can I sleep outside in the tent tonight? Please? Emma's parents said she can if you say I can." Two parents. Two people to ask permission from. Two people who'd share the responsibility of saying yes or negotiating the details or worrying about whether it was too cold or whether 10-year-olds could really be trusted to stay in a tent all night. It was such a small thing, such an ordinary moment of family life, but it represented everything they'd fought for, everything they'd built, everything that had started with three men trying to prove kindness was fake and had instead proven that love was the most real thing any of them would ever experience. "Sure, sweetheart," Lily signed, "but you need to be in bed by 10, even if you're in the tent." "Deal," Maisie signed enthusiastically, already running back to tell Emma the good news. Evan pulled Lily closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. 3 years ago, I was sitting in a restaurant waiting to meet you, convinced I was walking into a trap." "You were walking into a trap," Lily reminded him with a smile. "But it wasn't the trap they thought it was," Evan continued. "It was a trap that caught all the best parts of my life. You, this family, this happiness. So maybe I should send Derek a thank you card." "Absolutely not," Lily signed, laughing. "Let's just be grateful and leave it at that." "Fair enough," Evan agreed. They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, until Maisie and Emma had successfully set up the tent and were settled in with flashlights and snacks and enough stuffed animals to populate a toy store. They watched the light in the tent glow against the darkness, heard the faint sound of giggles carrying across the yard, felt the weight and wonder of being parents to this extraordinary child who'd survived loss and embraced love with equal courage. Inside the house, Evan's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Catherine. "Just got word you're being considered for VP. Don't tell anyone I told you, but start thinking about whether you want it. You've earned it, Evan. Everything you've built here, everything you've accomplished. It's all because of who you are, not despite it. Your kindness wasn't a strategy. It was strength. And the company is better because of you." Evan showed the message to Lily, and she signed, "Are you going to take it, if they offer?" "I don't know," Evan admitted. "It would mean more responsibility, more time at the office, less time here with you and Maisie. It would also mean more money, more influence, more ability to shape the company culture in positive ways," Lily signed back. "And we'd make it work, the same way we make everything work, together, as a team, with communication and compromise and love." "When did you get so wise?" Evan signed with a smile. "I married you, didn't I?" Lily signed back. "That was pretty wise." They went inside eventually, checked on Maisie one more time. She and Emma were still awake, telling each other ghost stories that were more giggly than scary, and retreated to their own room. They got ready for bed in the comfortable routine they'd developed, brushed teeth and washed faces and changed into pajamas, moving around each other with practiced ease. In bed, wrapped in each other's arms, Lily signed against Evan's chest. "Thank you." "For what, Evan signed back. "For being brave enough to show up that night. For seeing me instead of my deafness. For letting me love Maisie. For building this life with me. For proving that kindness isn't weakness and love isn't a trap and family is what you make it. Thank you for staying," Evan signed. "For refusing to let their cruelty define us. For choosing hope over bitterness. For being exactly who you are. For making me believe in second chances." They fell asleep like that, signing love to each other in the darkness. Two people who'd walked into a trap designed to expose fraud and had instead found the most genuine thing either of them had ever experienced. Outside in a tent in their backyard, their daughter slept safe and happy, dreaming of dinosaurs and constellations and a future as bright and limitless as the stars overhead. Inside, her parents slept tangled together, their rings catching the moonlight streaming through the window, their hearts beating in synchronized rhythm. They'd been set up, pranked,
targeted by bitterness and cynicism and the kind of cruelty that came from people who'd forgotten how to believe in goodness. But instead of breaking, they'd transformed. Instead of retreating, they'd expanded. Instead of proving that kindness was fake, they'd proven that it was the most powerful force in the world, strong enough to build families, heal wounds, transform strangers into soulmates, and turn the worst intentions into the best possible outcome. The trap had been sprung. Love had won. And every single day forward, in every small choice and grand gesture, they would continue choosing each other, choosing kindness, choosing hope, choosing to live as proof that some things really were exactly as beautiful as they seemed. And that was more than enough. That was everything.